All men are not created equal. I learned that lesson when I was 4 years old. Midoriya Izuku laid on his back, covered in bruises and his clothes smeared with grass and dirt stains. He'd just been put through the ringer for the capital offense of standing up to his friend, Bakugo Katsuki. The blonde boy Izuku had once considered as good as a brother had been turning into something of a bully, the praise and power associated with his quirk going straight to his head. Izuku had been trying to hang out with Katsuki and his two other friends when the human dynamite stick had started picking on another boy, even pushing him to the ground. So, Izuku did what he felt was right, get between Kakin and his target to try and defend the boy reduced to tears. Like All Might, like a pro hero. And what had he gotten for his efforts? Katsuki and the other two had stomped his ass into the ground and twisted their heels for good measure. He ached. Had he actually gotten a broken bone or two? Katsuki had definitely left some burns from his explosions, but when Tsubasa had jumped up and down on his chest, maybe his portly form had managed to crack a rib. Izuku wanted to cry, just thinking of how it would feel to sit up and try to limp his way back home, let alone the freak out his mom would have when she saw him in this state. Izuku's young mind was caught in a loop, playing over the past hour and wondering how it was fair. With a sinking feeling in his guts, he realized that it simply wasn't. Katsuki had a quirk, an awesome quirk. Even Tsubasa and Tasaki had some kind of superpower in the former's wings and the latter's extending fingers. What did Izuku have? Nothing. He was quirkless, ordinary in a world where extraordinary was the norm. The fight had been stacked against him from the start. 3-on-1. Superhumans against one plain human, fighting dirty against Izuku, whose brief defense had tried to stick to the rules and not cause real injury. Izuku felt tears well up in his eyes, not an uncommon occurrence. Still, this time felt different. Some of it was from his extensive injuries and the pain in his tiny body. But the pain in his heart was even worse somehow. It felt like a tiny little hole had formed inside as it sank in to the depths of his soul, that some people could get away with things that others just couldn't. Katsuki could be a downright mean kid and still be praised by teachers and neighbors and their classmates and total strangers just for having an amazing superpower. And Izuku, guilty of the crime of being born wrong, would probably be getting a lot of trouble with his mom and would be in even more trouble if he told the truth. Mom would tell Mitsuki Basin, who would try and punish Katsuki, who would take it out tenfold on Izuku's own hide the next time they met. So not only did he get beat up hard, but now he had to either lie or keep his mouth shut when his mother demanded an explanation for why he was just shy of needing the hospital. It wasn't right, and yet it still was. And nothing Izuku could think of doing would change that fact. Still, Izuku gulped and forced himself to sit up despite the agony it caused. Because, quirkless or not, he was going to be a hero. Heroes dealt with unfairness and injustice every day. This was a setback, but Izuku would not let it stop him. He lost this time, but next time he could do better. He could get lessons in fighting, or try and talk Katsuki down from his bullying instead of provoking him, or something different from being treated like a human punching bag by the friend he'd had since he was in diapers. "Are you quite well, young one?" Izuku jolted and had to bite back a wince at how the jerking motion aggravated his injured everything. He looked up and saw a woman crouched down next to him, hands laid on her knees. Her face was set in a sort of calm, neutral mask. Still, Izuku was pretty sure he saw a warmth in her dark blue eyes. She was wearing traditional layered robes in a golden yellow, like she had just come from or was going to one of the historic districts. The most noticeable thing about her was her bald head, which gave a stark emphasis to her sharp cheekbones and hawkish nose. She looked a little odd, but compared to some mutation quirks or hero costumes, she was unremarkable. Izuku rubbed an arm over his eyes to try and clean up the evidence of his crying. "I'm fine. No need to worry about me." The woman hummed in the back of her throat. "If this is what you consider fine, I shudder to think what would merit the term bad or worse. You're bleeding, burnt, and I'm fairly certain you have internal injuries. What happened to you, young one?" Izuku gulped. He wanted to tell the truth, But this could turn out even worse than telling his mom. This well-intentioned stranger could call the police if she heard he'd been assaulted, even by fellow children, and getting even a small note of violence or other villainous behavior on Katsuki's record would not end well. Not at all. Swallowing, he tried to sound convincing. "It's nothing, ma'am. I just fell down." The woman's expression only shifted a little from its original position, but it was enough to perfectly convey her skepticism and a mild sense of being insulted at such an obvious lie. "Oh, really? You fell, you say?" Izuku felt the burn of shame in his shoulders and down his spine. He looked down. "Okay, I didn't fall. Some other kids hit me a lot. Do you happen to recognize them or know their names? Such behavior should be reported to their families, don't you think?" The woman said, her tone somehow both gentle as water and firm as stone. Izuku shook his head immediately. No, never saw them before in my life." "Child, please," the woman said, her eyes narrowing. It's not worth the trouble, ma'am." Izuku tried to protest. "I beg to differ. There's rough housing, and then there's what I see in front of me. You require medical attention, and that goes beyond a simple playground squabble. But do tell, why are you trying to protect those who did this to you from the consequences of their actions?" the woman asked, still in a deep squat and seemingly perfectly comfortable to stay there next to him however long it took to get the truth out of Izuku. Izuku hunched into himself, feeling the shame of his weakness and stupidity in trying to defy Kakin and being put in his proper place. "It's not like it matters. Im quirklis, mung. It doesn't count what other kids do to me. I'm the one who'd get in trouble if you made me name names and point fingers." The woman sighed, as if she now understood perfectly. Well, from one quirkless to another, I say that while it may not get the response that it deserves, you should still advocate for yourself. If you stay quiet when they knock you down and don't speak up, it tells them that they can get away with doing it the next time as well." Izuku blinked and looked up at the kind stranger. You too?" he asked. He'd never met another quirkless person. He knew it was more common with adults than kids, or those closer to his age, but still. "Yes, I too am a mere baseline Homo sapien," the woman said with a curl of humor and a slight upturn to her lips. "And believe it or not, I'm much older than I look. I remember when it was those with quirks who were treated as lepers or bullied or seen as freaks and subhuman. Now it's the other way around, but that does not make it any better. Regardless of where society draws the lines of right and wrong, appropriate and inappropriate, beautiful and ugly, we all are still people in the end. And every person has the right to not be treated like this." Izuku gulped and felt his stupid tear ducts act up again. "Then why does it still happen?" he asked the woman who had taken the time to come check on him. "People have been asking that question for as long as there have been people. We have come up with many answers, but no one can agree on which one is the right one. Maybe there is no right answer, or any answer at all. It doesn't make sense, young one, I know, but not everything does. And not everything has to," the woman said with a timeless calm and wisdom. "I guess." Izuku nodded, even that small motion enough to make him want to hiss. "So, you say I should tell on the kids who did this?" "I'm saying that your silence would send a certain message that might lead to more of the same. Yet I cannot promise that speaking up would do any better. It's really up to you, young one. Sometimes, in life, one has no good choice to make, only less bad or uncertain. What does your heart tell you to do about what happened today?" The sweet bald lady looked at Izuku expectantly. Izuku tried to do as she asked, to feel instead of think. "I think those boys aren't really bad people. They just don't like me because I'm me. Getting them in trouble with the grown-ups will just make things worse. I need to stand up to them somehow, and I need to do it myself," is what finally came out his mouth. "Very well, but that confrontation, however you prepare for it, is for another day. Right now, we should really get you home," the woman said, offering her hand. Izuku took it gratefully and used the surprisingly sturdy grip and helped him up to his feet. It didn't really hurt more or less once he was upright, just different levels in different places. Izuku kept his hand in this nice lady's, not wanting to let go. He knew about stranger danger and all that, but something in his guts, past the bruising, told him he could trust her. "I'm Midoriya Izuku, by the way. Nice to meet you," Izuku said to the first person to give a damn about him besides his parents in what felt like forever. Ever since his diagnosis came out, really. "You may call me Karai-san, young Izuku. A pleasure to make your acquaintance." The bald woman nodded back in acknowledgement. Izuku frowned. "Doesn't that mean really, really old, like ancient?" "Yes, it does." Karai-san said no more on the subject of her name. "Now, shall I escort you to your residence? I truly worry you wouldn't make it without assistance." Izuku gave simple instructions back to his family's apartment, and Karai-san helpfully kept to the sluggish pace that was all he could manage. She seemed comfortable with silence, only speaking in direct response to one of Izuku's questions. And he was so soon out of breath from the pained exertion of moving in his current state that he joined her in keeping quiet. She never once let go of his hand, though, and Izuku could not think of any other time in his life where someone had simply shared space with him like this. His mom loved and adored him. He was her baby, but she came on a bit strong. Hakken had been more of an idol, an ideal to strive towards and always fall short of. With Karai-san, though, Izuku felt he could just be, and she would allow him to do exactly that. No more, no less. It was strangely intimate, so far as Izuku understood the concept. He barely knew anything about her besides her name and the fact they were both quirkless. Yet he felt as comfortable as he imagined he'd be with an older sister or aunt or true friend. Or maybe he was just loopy from too many knocks to the noggin. Izuku reached the base of the long, long flight of stairs up to the 5th floor of their apartment building. As if she could hear his thoughts, Karai-san spoke up. "I may carry you, if you feel you cannot do the climb. Would you prefer piggyback or princess carry?" "Piggyback. Am not a girl," Izuku mumbled, almost ready to fall asleep, standing up. "Getting your ass pummeled really took it out of you, let alone the limping trip back home afterwards." "Of course, Izuku," Kusin nodded, though there was a touch of hidden laughter in her tone and the crinkle of her eyes. Once safely secured on her back, Izuku held on tight as Kusin managed the climb, not even getting out of breath despite the extra weight and a steady pace. "What do you do, Karai-san? For work?" Izuku asked, his curious side feeling comfortable enough to show itself. "I own and run an antique bookshop," Karai-san answered. "I'm also somewhat skilled at their upkeep and repair. Some call me the book doctor, and there are weeks I make more business restoring volumes people bring in than from sales of my merchandise. It's a calm and quiet life, which suits me well." "Ooh, that's cool. Do you have anything from the pre-quirk era?" Izuku checked. "More than half my stock predates the dawn of quirks, in point of fact. I also have an autographed first edition of Destro's Manifesto. Many find it interesting, yet none seem to want to actually buy it." Karai-san gave an amused huff. "Do you have a family? Someone special, kids, anyone?" Izuku asked, perhaps a bit more blunt and rude than he normally would be, but he was too tired for manners. "I had one. They're all gone now. I alone remain," Karai-san said, her voice not getting sad so much as nostalgic. "Sorry," Izuku said into her shoulder. "You seem so nice. It's not good that you're alone." "Who said I was alone?" Karai-san said with good cheer. "I have a few pets and people I consider good friends. Beyond even that, I have you now, and the baker I get my bread from, and my customers. No one is alone, Izuku, unless they close themselves off to everyone and everything. The trick is to recognize and treasure each connection that comes along." "Huh," Izuku hummed, turning that idea over in his head. "That makes sense. But why would anyone close themselves off like that?" "I suppose they decide the pain of solitude weighs less than the pain of losing someone," Karai-san shrugged. "Which apartment number was yours again?" Izuku gave the number. When they reached his apartment door, the sky was just starting to turn as late afternoon began to bleed into early evening. "Will I ever see you again, Karai-san?" Izuku asked as she softly placed him back on his feet. "If you want to see me, and of course if your mother approves, then most definitely." Karai-san reached into one of the folds of her robes and withdrew a business card. She pressed it into his much smaller hand. Call that number or visit my shop if you want to have another chat. Although, as I recall, you expressed a desire to stand up to certain children, presumably in a physical conflict much like the one you lost today. In that case, I am available for self-defense lessons. Izuku blinked. You know how to fight? I know how to defend myself, protect others, and defeat opponents, Kurisan said back, which seemed like just a long way to say this to Izuku, though he felt he might be missing something. Karai-san was complicated and very wise. That was his growing impression. Well, if Mom says okay, I'll totally take you up on that. Izuku found it in his battered body and empty energy reserves to beam up at her. Would you like to meet her? Alas, I must return home with haste. I have a bored cat, a lonely dog, and an irritable owl that were expecting me back by now. This is where we part ways, young Izuku. Karai laid a hand on his head, light as a feather. May your body stay strong, your mind stay open, your heart stay full, and your soul stay light. Farewell, Izuku. It must have been Izuku's imagination, but it almost seemed like fireflies or sparks from a campfire trailed from Karai-san's hand when she withdrew it from atop his curly mop of hair. Shaking his head to clear the hallucination, Izuku dug deep and managed a wave. Bye, Karai-san. Thanks for everything. Karai-san gave him a small but very real smile, then turned with a rather cool swish of her robes and took off at a light jog down the stairs she'd just carried him up. Izuku watched her go, wondering if he'd just made a friend. Could kids his age be friends with adults they weren't related to? He'd ask his mom, right after he fended off the worried Inquisition as soon as she saw him like this. Izuku pulled his key out of his pocket and let himself into his home. He noted that only his mom's shoes were tucked by the door. Dad had been working late a lot lately, had been for months, and Izuku was pretty sure it wasn't a coincidence that it started the day after he came home from the doctor with his lack of a gift officially verified. Izuku knew it was silly to blame himself for his dad being ashamed to have a quirkless son. Well, 4-year-olds were allowed to be silly. Shaking his head from thoughts of his increasingly absent parent, he called out for the one that had only ever failed him once. I'm home, he called. Izuku, baby, you were at the playground for a really long time. I hope you had lots of fun, his mom called from the kitchen. Izuku forced weary legs to carry him to where his mom could see him. Not exactly, he mumbled, half wishing he could just sneak into his bedroom and skip dinner. Anything to delay the coming flood of concern and motherly panic. What do you, Midoriya Inko looked over from where she was meal prepping and shrieked so loud Izuku heard a ringing in his ears afterward. Izuku, faster than some speed or teleportation quirks it felt like, Izuku's mom was crouched and checking him from head to toe. She seemed to get more worked up with every boo-boo she found and every wince from Izuku as her soft hands mapped out his injuries. Baby, who did this to you? Was it a villain? I'll call 911. Mom, calm down. It was just some kids. Izuku tried to talk her off the metaphorical ledge. Were they in your class? Or were they older? Why did they do this to you, baby? Inko demanded. Izuku had learned with Karai-san that apparently a direct lie wouldn't work. And that was on a complete stranger as opposed to the woman who'd birthed him. So instead, he told a piece of the truth that was more convenient than the whole thing. They were older, by only weeks or months, but still, Kakin, Tsubasa, and Tasaki were all older than Izuku. He'd always been the baby or runt of their quartet. And they did this because they had a problem with kids like me, Izuku forced himself to say. Inko's eyes filled with tears. He'd gotten his oversensitive internal waterworks from her. Oh, Izuku, I'm so sorry. Not your fault, Mom, Izuku told her. Part of him, just a small part, but still there, resented that he was now comforting her. She acted like it was her personal fault that he'd been born quirkless, which made no sense to Izuku, and he hated, not much, but there were a few cinders burning in his heart, that his mom was so caught up with her own issues with his quirklessness that he had to be the one taking care of her and not the other way around, as was proper. Well, did you get their names? Did you recognize them? We can report them to the police. They'll definitely get grounded when their parents find out. Inko offered, moving past her little pity moment to get back to outraged mama bear mode. Izuku hesitated, but he found he couldn't lie on this. I don't want them grounded, Mom. I want them to lose. I want to learn to defend myself. Something about the way Karai-san had said it made it sound so much better than how to fight. Izuku, what are you talking about? You know you can't fight with your condition, Inko said, almost looking like she'd swallowed lemon juice. Izuku frowned up at his mother. Mom, people were fighting for thousands of years before the start of the quirk era. Most heroes have their own CQC style that they teach to their sidekicks that doesn't require any kind of quirk usage. Just because I'm quirkless doesn't mean I'm a cripple. I can learn to fight just like anyone else. And I even have a teacher lined up. What do you mean? Inko blinked. She seemed taken aback at the fire Izuku was showing at that moment. Normally, he was her sweet little cinnamon roll. This very nice woman, Kurisin, found me after the bullies finished with me and helped me get back here. She's quirkless too, by the way, and she offered to teach me some self-defense. She probably has to deal with the same kind of stuff from grown-up jerks like the kids who hurt me, so she probably knows what she's doing. Here's her card. You can call her and ask her yourself. Izuku handed over the small rectangle of stationery. Inko examined the card front and back. I know this store. I've seen it in passing, but I've never gone in. You say the owner helped you and offered to train you in martial arts. She sounded rather dubious. Karai-san is very polite and very smart, and she's so at peace. Not happy, really, but it's like she's okay with everything life has thrown and will throw at her. I want to be like that. She's not a hero or anything, but she was my hero today, Izuku found himself saying. Inko looked into Izuku's face. Some deep tension that had been there for months felt like it eased just a tad. I think it's very nice you made friends with another person like you, baby. I want to meet her myself, but if she was genuine with that offer, I don't see why you can't learn a few moves to scare off bullies. But don't go hunting them down. Good boys never start fights, they only finish them. Yes, Mom. Izuku nodded, his cheeks hurting from the smile he just couldn't stop. For such a crappy day, it seemed to be having a really nice ending. Then Mom went to fetch the first aid kit, and Izuku learned that the cure was sometimes just as bad as the injury. She insisted iodine was the best for cleaning his many wounds. Fed, bathed, and tucked in a bed, Izuku fell asleep looking up at his posters of All Might and other pro heroes. He still admired them. Heroes were the coolest after all. But maybe you should remember the everyday heroes like Karai-san out there. And even if he never ended up a hero, maybe he could still be someone's hero someday. The mystic hero. The next few days were not fun for Izuku, waking up in pain and still having to go to kindergarten. Katsuki and the other two seemed very smug, as if beating someone up so bad they limped the next day was something to be proud of. Izuku decided that it just wasn't worth trying to get back at them until he was all trained up by Karai-san. So he'd just sneak around or run like a coward until he was confident he'd win in a fist fight. As for the jeering and name-calling and constant harassment over his quirkless status, well, as his mom always said, words will never hurt him. Maybe if he repeated it enough times, he'd even start believing that. After the session ended on Friday, Izuku packed everything in his backpack and went to meet his mom at the entrance. Today they were set to have afternoon tea with Karai-san. Izuku and Inko had both spoken with Karai-san over the phone since that first meeting, and Izuku's parents seemed assured enough to risk an in-person meeting to discuss Izuku's training. Inko insisted on playing hostess, but Izuku had learned that Karai-san was very particular with her tea. She was apparently bringing her own stock and equipment to their apartment for reasons beyond his understanding. Grown-ups could be so weird. Izuku and Inko took the familiar route back to their apartment complex. They reached their floor and found Karai-san waiting patiently by their door. Oh, Karai-san, yes? I'm Midoriya Inko, and you've met my Izuku. I'm so sorry if we kept you waiting, Inko said after a bow of greeting. Worry not, Midoriya-san. I purposely arrived early. I assure you it was no trouble to wait for your arrival. Karai-san said with her small smile and stoic calm. Now that he wasn't drowsy with pain, Izuku realized there was something intense about her. Not like she was angry or anything, more that she had a certain presence that Izuku had to that point only associated with the biggest and strongest of heroes and heroines. While taller than average, Karai-san didn't seem anything special on the surface apart from her baldness and colorful robes. Still, for reasons Izuku couldn't put his finger on, he was getting the feeling she was fully capable of kicking a grown man's ass and not even getting out of breath. Just something in the way she held herself, the way she moved, the way she carefully crafted her words. Inko audibly gulped, as if she sensed the same weight in the air around the bookshop owner. Gathering herself, Inko went to open the door. "Please do come in. You're more than welcome. I can't begin to thank you for looking after my boy after all that unpleasantness." "It was my honor and my pleasure to come to his aid," Karai-san said, which sounded a tad odd and formal, but she was just like that. Izuku was pretty sure. She patted a bulging sack bag in sunset orange that stood out brightly against her robes, cream-colored today. "I brought my tea set. If I may trouble you for some water, I'll get started immediately." Inko led Karai-san into their apartment, and Izuku was treated to a front-row seat of what he was sure was a masterful example of tea-making, easily replying to polite questions from Inko and Izuku simultaneously. Izuku watched Karai-san do her ritual for preparing tea. She filled her own kettle with filtered water, then set it on a stand before lighting a small burner directly underneath with a match. Then she asked seemingly innocuous questions about their day or how they were feeling with a thoughtful expression. Satisfied with their answers, she pulled out small boxes of tea leaves and assembled what Izuku realized was a personalized blend on the spot. The right amounts and ratios of dried leaves placed in a ceramic bowl. She crushed them into powder with her own mortar and pestle before tying up the resultant flakes in her own tea bags. Placing the bags in her own mugs, she poured the steaming kettle water into each cup right to the brim. She individually played with each bag, making sure it was steeping evenly in all 3 cups. Finally, after some internal count that was probably exact to the second, Karai lifted all 3 bags and took them to the garbage can. Then she took her own spoon and a cloth-covered jar of honey and deliberately shook a dollop into each cup. Finally done, she cleaned up her equipment, and by the time she sat back down at the kitchen table, the tea had cooled to a comfortable drinking temperature. The whole production had flowed smoothly, as if Karai-san had rehearsed the whole thing beforehand. "Enjoy," Karai-san offered as she took her mug and held it in both hands. "Do tell me if it's not up to your standards. I welcome criticism so long as it's constructive." "That is an excellent practice," Inko said, sounding a tad overwhelmed by the entire ceremony that had gone down in her own kitchen. She took her mug and took a cautious sip. She blinked. "I am so serious. Did you slip something illegal in this? I've never had a cup this tasty before." Curious at what prompted such a reaction, Izuku took his own mug and carefully sipped the hot liquid. He gasped once it was past his tongue. "Wow, it's like drinking magic. What's your secret, Karai-san?" "It's just tea with a little honey. It's all in the preparation, and I have studied and practiced making tea for a long time now." Karai-san grinned back at Izuku and his mother. "I will admit these leaves come from my personal garden, and I consider a part-time job to grow and maintain each tree." "I was honestly expecting Lipton's or something," Inko chuckled, taking a long, lingering sip. "This really is extraordinary. If nothing else comes from our meeting, know it was worth it just for this cup." "Thank you, Midoriya-san. I appreciate that." Karai-san took her own sip, her eyes moving in a slow, smooth way as if she were observing the whole room at once and frequently updating her memory on where everything was. "You have a lovely home." "Oh, you're too kind," Inko blushed. Izuku took another gulp. "You know how they named kombucha after Dr. Kombu? I think I'll call this Kareicha. It's so much better than normal tea. It's in its own category." "I take that as high praise, young Izuku," Karai-san said with warmth. She took another drink from her cup before setting it back on the table in front of her. "Now, With the ice broken as it were, let's get to business. Am I correct in presuming Izuku still desires to learn the art of physical combat, and that this is a sort of interview to determine my credentials on your part, Midoriya-san? Hit the nail on the head. Inko nodded, her demeanor turning serious. She set her cup down too. Are you formally trained in hand-to-hand? Have any kind of experience with teaching or coaching a young boy? With all due respect, Karai-san, you are a quirkless shopkeeper. What would you know about winning a fight? I am indeed formally trained, earning master rank in my particular school of training in my younger years. I have indeed taught students of a variety of ages and body types in the same manner I was trained. And I have a number of victories against opponents with and without quirks under my belt, Karai-san said without so much as blinking. Your caution and concern is understandable, Midoriya-san. But keep in mind that I am older than you by a wide margin, and I did indeed have a life before settling down in my bookshop. You don't look that old, Izuku butted in, not liking how tense this was getting right from the off. Appearances can be deceiving, young Izuku. I am old enough to be your grandmother. I am simply blessed, or perhaps cursed, to not look like it on the surface, Karai-san said, and she certainly sounded like a wizened old crone at that moment. For all she appeared mid-40s at the oldest, Izuku suddenly was sure her real age would surprise him at how high it was. Inko was frowning. What school of training precisely? And how can I be sure you are competent enough to teach my Izuku how to keep from getting hurt? The literal translation to Japanese would be the way of the warrior mystic. It's unique to the monastery in Nepal, where I trained before I came to Japan. If you wish me to demonstrate for your entertainment or scrutiny, I must decline. Either take me at my word that I am skilled enough to teach your son, or do not, Karai-san said, not quite rude, but very direct. Oh, you Nepalese? You don't look it, Inko said, finding herself a little on the back foot. She'd never quite met someone like Karai-san. She just didn't react anything like Inko was used to in other people. In point of fact, I am Celtic. I was something of a traveler in my youth, and my wanderings brought me to the Kamar Taj in Kathmandu. I stayed for a number of years. Circumstances bid me to leave it behind, and the path I took afterwards brought me here to Mizudafu, Kosin said with eyes distant with memories before they refocused on the mother and son in front of her. To the matter at hand, I have experience. I am willing to share that experience with Izuku so that he might be better prepared to protect himself from your average brawler. How far he progresses to his own mastery will be a matter of innate talent mixed with the fruit of his own labor. If at any point he asks to stop or I feel he's not taking my lesson seriously, I will end the arrangement. The question to be answered is whether you both consent to Izuku becoming my student. Izuku spoke up after his mother was silent and thought a little too long. How long will it take for me to get good enough to win against the average person? That is a complicated question, young Izuku. First, define average. Do you mean in regards to formal training in attack and defense, or in terms of physical strength, speed, and reflexes? In your age group, or against a grown person? Also, how do you define win? Do you mean pinning your opponent in a hold they cannot escape from? Breaking skin? Breaking bone? If you meant the boys who hurt you the day we met, I cannot speak with any certainty. I don't know how much training they have, if any, or what factor their individual quirks would play in any conflict. In my experience as a teacher of this particular art, it could take as long as 6 months with a full hour of dedicated training daily before I deem you competent enough to be less dangerous to yourself than any opponent. Karai-san pinned Izuku with a look sharp as a needle sticking a butterfly to a page. Something to bear in mind, young Izuku, is that I would not be training you for one revenge fight. If you agree to become my student, I will do my utmost to lay a foundation which you will rely on for the rest of your natural life. It will take exceptional strength of will and self-discipline to become proficient in this style, but the benefits will extend to every aspect of your life. The forms and conditioning will strengthen your body. The drills and spars will strengthen your mind. The meditation and self-awareness necessary will strengthen your heart. And perhaps the knowledge and confidence in yourself to handle a physical ordeal will strengthen your soul. It is a substantial gift I offer you, young Izuku, but you must be willing to pay the price to receive it. If you are not, then we shall remain no more than friends. I will not mentor an uncommitted pupil. Either you will put your all into this, or you will not, and we will stop. Decide which with care." Izuku looked down, unable to meet that piercing stare. He didn't want to admit it, but he had been thinking of just training until he was good enough to beat Kakin in a straight fight, and then that would be that. Karai-san, instead, was taking it as a significant investment of time and energy, and she wanted to be sure it was worth doing. It was a much bigger deal than he imagined it would be. Still, he thought of that day again. Not so much the part where he gotten butt whooped. The way it started, with Izuku wanting to defend that poor kid Katsuki had made cry. Izuku, in a way, had won in his goal of taking the attention off that particular victim. Izuku still wanted to be a hero, quirk or no quirk. It was his dream, the reason he got up in the morning. He was young, but he knew it in his bones that that was the most important goal in his life. What kind of hero couldn't fight back against villains? What good was a hero who only ended up defeated, or worse, trying to defend innocent civilians? Put that way, Karai-san's teaching would lay the groundwork for Izuku's future career, at least in part. And then it just seemed so obvious. Izuku looked up and met Koroi-san's unfathomable gaze with determination. "If you're in, I'm in, Karai-san." Karai-san's lips turned up in a pleased smile. "Good, but we still need your mother's consent." Izuku shamelessly turned to his mom, who still looked on the fence, and used the eyes. She crumbled like a house of cards. "All right, Izuku. If you give me your word to take good care of my baby, Karai-san, then I'll allow this to happen." "You have it, Midoriya-san," Karai-san nodded. "Now, young Izuku, do you have any non-negotiable commitments for the rest of the day?" Izuku blinked, thrown by the question out of left field. "No, I finished all my homework already. Dinner's at 6 and bedtime is 8, but that's it." "Why?" "Because now you are my student, and I fully expect you to practice at least a little every single day for the duration of this relationship. You have 10 minutes to go to the bathroom and change into any clothes you don't mind getting dirty. Then we will go to the yard outside and assess where you stand in terms of physicality. It will not be pleasant, but it is necessary," Karai-san, or Karai-sensei rather, said as she finished her mug of tea. Izuku sort of gawked at the bald woman before he realized she really wasn't joking. Well, he promised, and heroes keep their promises. Izuku finished off his tea and ran to the bathroom. Once his business was done and his hands were washed, he went to change out of his school shoes and in his sneakers, probably better suited for hard exercise. Then he dashed back to the kitchen. He caught the tail end of a talk between his mom and Karai-sensei on where she got her honey. Apparently, it was imported from an old friend in New Zealand, so it was actually legit Manuka honey. Izuku cleared his throat and bowed. "Ready to start, Karai-sensei." "With time to spare." "A good sign, but let's not get ahead of ourselves." "I bid you farewell, Midoriya-san. Would it be an imposition to leave my bag here while I'm outside with young Izuku?" Karai-sensei posed to Inko. "Oh, by all means, Inko allowed. Keep in mind he's still recovering from what happened earlier in the week, please. Nothing too extreme on his very first day." Duly noted, Karai-sensei nodded. She borrowed a couple water bottles from their fridge before making for the door. Izuku obediently followed after his new master. They made their way to the base floor of the building. At the bottom of the steps, Karai-sensei turned and indicated a flat stretch of concrete wall. "We shall start with your chest and pushing muscles. Place your hands against the wall as if you're going to do a push-up." Izuku got into the position. "As I promised your mother, we will not do anything too extreme. However, I guarantee you will feel all this tomorrow morning. Now, lean towards and then push away from the wall as if you were doing a push-up against the ground. Remember to keep good form. Breathe in going down, breathe out, going up. Keep a steady pace, the same amount of time going both directions. Don't just drop to the ground and then bounce back up. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You can face the wall or face the sky, but make sure your chest touches the wall as gently as you would kiss a baby's forehead. Remember all that, and do these wall push-ups until you cannot do any more. Go!" Izuku's head was swimming with all that rapid-fire information, but he did his best to obey. He thought this was a joke compared to real push-ups, but he was surprised to discover a distinct burn in his upper arms by the 15th or 16th rep. Still, he had his instruction. He pushed through the burn, forcing his muscles to keep moving as Karai-sensei bid. He lost count, and then he reached a point where no matter how much his brain screamed at his arms, he could not do another rep. "Stop. That is enough," Karai-sensei said, again displaying an uncanny ability to read him like a book. "You will rest for 2 minutes. If you need water, you may have some now. Then we shall move to the abdominals." Izuku guzzled down half a bottle, surprised how much of a sweat he'd built up doing a baby version of the traditional exercise. "Karai-sensei, why didn't you have me do normal push-ups to test me?" he asked once he had his breath back. "Many reasons. We are starting light, given your stage of recovery. Low-intensity exercises for high reps help to develop endurance more so than the reverse, which trains for power. There is a progression in bodyweight exercises, and starting from square one on your first day seemed appropriate. And I wish to see how far you would be willing to push yourself, having no idea how much I have planned until I release you for the day," Karai-sensei rattled off. Not as if he were an idiot, more simply pointing out all the angles she'd approached the issue of his first day of training. "Now, sit on that bench, lean back, and tuck your knees back up to your chest." Izuku went through equally strenuous rounds of knee tucks, half squats, pulling himself against a telephone pole to simulate pull-ups, and then pushing himself up from the ground into a backbend. When his whole body was aching and his shirt was soaked like he'd been on a water ride at the theme park, Karai-sensei brought him back to the flight of stairs. "You have 5 minutes to go up and down this flight of stairs as many times as you can. If you trip or fall, I will catch you and you will have to start over. Don't push too hard, but show me what you're made of. Remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and breathe with intention. Go." Izuku didn't quite run up the steps, but he definitely climbed faster than he normally would. The fact that the stairwell was designed for adults and not short kindergartners made sure it was a hard challenge anyway. He sank into the burn that had gotten no more enjoyable after prolonged exposure, just forcing himself to move with no more brain power involved than coordinating his limbs. Karai-sensei would keep count. His job was just to do as much as he could, as fast as he could, as clean as he could. "Stop. Come down here and catch your breath," Karai-sensei said what must have been 5 minutes later. Izuku's arms, legs, torso, even his neck and head felt like watery jelly. It was getting hard just to stand up. "This is light," he huffed between big gasps for breath once he reached his sensei's side. "Yes," Karai-sensei said no more than that, and Izuku had to remember that he'd promised. He had to keep it no matter what. Even if he was already debating pretending to be sick to get out of tomorrow's training, let alone the third day, and so on, stretching out into the future. "Now we shall do some cool down stretches. Keep your eyes on me and simply mirror my movements. Precision will come with time. For today, this is merely to promote healthy blood flow and ease the soreness you'll be feeling tonight," Karai-sensei said. Then she went into what felt like a Tai Chi routine, except Izuku knew Tai Chi since his mom did it, and this wasn't that. Still, he did his best to copy what Karai-sensei did as she gently moved into full body stretches that flowed like some odd dance. After 10 minutes without a noticeable repeat in the forms they were doing, Karai-sensei stood up straight. "It is 5:30. I shall escort you back upstairs and work out a formal schedule with your mother based on our mutual availability. In the early days, I am able to come here to train you. In time, though, I shall expect you to commute to my shop, and we shall practice in the garden out back." "Right." Izuku nodded, feeling almost as bad as he had after the beatdown. Still, however grueling all the exercise had been, there was an odd sweetness to all the aches and pains. He felt accomplished. These feelings, good or bad, weren't something that happened to him because of others. He'd tested his limits and met them the old-fashioned way, with grit and sweat. It still sucked, but it was a good kind of suck if that even made sense. Karai-sensei patiently walked beside him at the best speed he could manage all the way up to his apartment. Izuku let them in with his key. He went straight to the couch and belly flopped onto the cozy softness as soon as he managed to get onto the cushions. He was vaguely aware of Karai-sensei and his mom talking in the background, and only the roaring pit in his stomach kept Izuku from resisting the urge to just fall asleep right there in the living room before dinner. Finally, Karai-sensei took her leave, along with her bag filled with tea paraphernalia. Izuku ate dinner in a bit of a haze, took a bath with his mother as normal, and he was out like a light as soon as he was in his pajamas and tucked in. Over the next 3 months, Izuku learned that his first day really had been Karai-sensei's idea of light. It wasn't just the workouts, though those only got tougher, longer, and more intense. Karai-sensei gave homework. So on top of all his stuff for school, he had to read certain books, write essays based on prompts, and play lots of puzzle and strategy games. Karai-sensei's logic was that the mind was as much a part of him to train as any muscle, and he had to keep it sharpened like a knife. Plus, there was all the meditation, which turned out to not be as easy as sitting funny and humming. The way Karai-sensei described it, meditation was the ability to detach from thoughts and emotions to return to center and act from there instead of impulsively or enmeshed with things outside his true self. She described it as finding the home deep inside, amidst the chaos of everything outside. Izuku wasn't sure he did it right, but he did his best to follow Karai-sensei's instructions when they took their meditation breaks. He'd get better with practice, right? There were highs and lows to being Karai-sensei's student. The most obvious low was how exhausted Izuku got after each lesson and the aftereffects that could linger for days afterwards. Still, there was that elusive yet undeniable high he got after pushing himself through that mental and physical wall of resistance and coming out the other side better than before. The kata were pretty cool, and Izuku had genuine fun doing drills to learn and work the elaborate movements of the warrior mystic style into his body and brain. All the lessons meant he had very little free time outside school, or even on the weekends, but who really wanted to hang out with the quirkless kid anyway, right? He got to meet Crookshanks the cat, Heen the dog, Archimedes the owl, and explore Karai-sensei's awesome bookshop with the beautiful garden growing out back. He got to drink Karai-sensei's spectacular tea, and he was pretty sure he'd never had the same blend twice. Then it was spring vacation, and kindergarten was over. Izuku would be starting primary school next month. He was sure it would only get harder to maintain his apprenticeship to Karai-sensei alongside his education, but he was determined to make it work. His mom had decided to throw together a little graduation party, a little way to mark the milestone in Izuku's life. Izuku had mixed feelings about the event coming that evening. On the one hand, his mom's pork katsudan and sweets. On the other, Katsuki would be there, Inko and Mitsuki somehow oblivious to the fact that their sons no longer were joined at the hip and the Bakugas, of course, invited. Izuku had to endure his stuff being stolen or even blown up if Katsuki could sneak it from him during school hours, and the urge to use some of the moves he was learning on the explosive blonde seemed to grow by the day. Still, he made a promise to both his mom and Karai-sensei to never initiate a fight unless it was in defense of himself or another person. His stuff was just stuff, totally replaceable, and not worth breaking his vow. Izuku left the apartment with his mom. There had been a lot of packing of boxes over the last couple weeks. Inko insisted that his father Hisashi had gotten a big promotion and him moving overseas would be a good thing for the family. But Izuku could read between the lines even at the tender age of 4. He wasn't sure if a legal divorce was involved, but his dad was cutting ties and leaving behind his broken son and the wife who'd failed at her duty to deliver a healthy son. Izuku had made what peace he could with it, and his pillow had the tear stains to prove it. They went at the local park, Izuku's mom laying a party tablecloth over a picnic table and setting up the places for all the expected guests. A total of 3 other kids and their parents out of the whole class had agreed to come. Katsuki was being dragged along with Mitsuki Obasan. Hamada was the only other kid in the class who'd known shogi for Izuku to practice with, and they'd become playful rivals if not true friends. And Kamiko was probably just coming for the free food. Karai-sensei, said she might pop in, but Heen had an appointment at the vet, so she might run late or miss the whole thing. At the appointed time, everyone who'd agreed to come had shown up. Inko happily handed out a variety of games or encouraged the kids to just go nuts in the park, so long as they stayed in eyesight of the parents, of course. Izuku played a half-hearted game of hide-and-seek, tossed a ball with Katsuki at Mitsuki Obasan's insistence. She seemed to find her boy's tendency to aim for the head innocent somehow, and enjoyed a couple good games of shogi with Hamada. Inko had just called them to get the food she'd kept in a thermal bag when disaster struck. There was a big commotion as Katsuki and Kamiko started to get into a screaming match. "You're such a big jerk. Just 'cause you got a neat quirk you think you're the best thing since sliced bread. Get over yourself," Kamiko shouted in full voice, presumably snapping after one too many snide comments from Katsuki about her weight. "You're just jealous, fat-ass extra. I'm gonna be the #1 hero, and you'll just end up old and alone with 24 cats since no one would ever want a lard, but like you." Katsuki threw right back, a cruel smirk on his lips as he used words he knew would hurt. "You're so mean," Kamiko whined, starting to tear up but still angry enough to chew nails. "You're gonna end up a villain, not a hero." Katsuki's response was to throw his hand at Kamiko's face and let off an explosion close enough to singe her cheeks. She screamed in fright and tumbled backwards. She huddled on the ground, looking up with true fear as Katsuki snarled at her like a rabid dog. "Shut up, you bitch. Im no bidain. I'm the best. I'll be a better hero than All Might. Keep your dumbass mouth shut about shit you know nothing about." Izuku moved without thinking, finding himself standing between Kamiko and Katsuki. "That's enough, Kakin." Katsuki snorted and spat right in Izuku's face. "Stop pretending to be a hero, Deko. You're just a quirkless loser, a tiny little pebble on the side of the road compared to the real heroes like me. Now get out of my way, or I'll make you." Izuku reached up and rubbed the spittle from his cheek. He felt the anger and the fear and the guilt and all the other things he'd felt the last time he'd stood up to Katsuki. The difference was, this time he had more than a shaky stance and gumption to rely on. He had the lessons he'd learned and was still learning from Karai-sensei. He had faith in himself to do better than he had last time. And even as things got tense, he found himself able to keep a cool head and not do something rash. "If I step aside, will you hurt Kamiko?" Izuku asked, his voice a tad wavering, but his spine straight. "I won't hurt her, Deku. Just going to remind her who she's talking to and not to disrespect her betters." Katsuki smirked. His red eyes were filled with injured pride and childish rage, somehow kept under tight control. It had never occurred to Izuku that Katsuki might be censoring himself, but he was struck with the intuition that all his bullying and boasting was nothing on what Katsuki could do if he really lost it. "I heard yes, so I'm not going to step aside," Izuku said firmly. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. "Don't you remember what happened last time, dumb Deku?" "Ido. But I'm still not moving," Izuku said. Katsuki seemed so confused, which seemed to only piss him off more. "Last chance, Deku. Get out of my way." Izuku took a deep, centering breath and shifted into his stance. "No. What is going on over here?" The bubble of tension popped as Kamiko's dad came charging over and helped his teary-eyed little girl up off the grass. The parents had arrived, noticing the scuffle about to get out of control. Kamiko and Izuku were fussed over by their respective mothers. Mitsuki Obasan twisted Katsuki's ear and loudly scolded him for being a troublemaker, and Hamada wisely played silent spectator. They awkwardly returned to the picnic table to have dinner, but the party atmosphere was well and truly soiled. Most left almost before they'd finished eating, leaving Izuku and Inko with the cleanup and an awkward silence. "Izuku, baby, was Katsuki one of the boys who hurt you the day you met Karai-san?" Inko asked with no warning as they approached their apartment building. Izuku sighed, but he knew better than to try and weasel out of such a direct question. "Yes, he was." "I thought you two were best friends." Inko sighed, as disappointed with herself for not seeing it as Izuku for keeping his silence. We were. Not anymore. He turned darker after his quirk came in. Deep down, maybe he's still that nice boy Kakin I looked up to and admired so much. But he's covered up by this new Katsuki who's, well, just the biggest bully I know outside actual villains. Izuku came clean to his mother. I'll have a word with Mitsuki, Inko sighed. Still, I'm glad you've been training so hard with Karai-san. But remember, good boys don't start fights. Just finish them. Izuku finished for her. I know. I wasn't even going to fight him because of me back there. I just didn't want him to hurt Kamiko. Inko got a small smile of purest pride. Sounds like a very heroic thing you were about to do, baby. Like something All Might would do. Izuku chuckled. For sure, Izuku. They reached their apartment door to find Karai-sensei waiting with Heen on a leash at her feet. The petite basset griffin scampered on his little feet right up to Izuku. Izuku obligingly offered his hand to shake the paw held out to him. Evening, Karai-sensei. Everything good with Heen here? He needs more exercise and less food. He's just this side of being obese for his size. Karai-sensei sighed with fond exasperation. Heen gave a huffy cough, as if protesting he was merely big-boned. I apologize for missing your party, but I figured I could at least deliver your gift in person. Karai-sensei reached into her robes, today a rich indigo, and brought out a small volume. The original version of this is in Sanskrit and part of my private collection. I took the time to transcribe it into Japanese for your benefit. Let me know what you think after you finish reading it, in 3 days at the latest. Yes, sensei, Izuku bowed, accepting the thin booklet enrobed in gift wrap. He was curious. What's it about? I shan't spoil the surprise. Just keep an open mind. Young Izuku, when reading it, Karai-sensei said. She seemed almost nervous for the first time Izuku had ever detected from her. With that delivered, I'll be on my way. Always a pleasure, Midoriya-san. With a nod to his mother, Karai-sensei tugged on Heen's leash and left them to enter their apartment. Izuku helped his mom put everything away and went to take his bath. Once he was all clean and in his warm pajamas, Izuku sat up at his bed and turned on the bedside lamp. It was still too early to go to bed, and the book Karai-sensei had given him hadn't felt very thick at all. Carefully unwrapping the gift wrap to save for later, Izuku regarded the spiral-bound journal in his hands. The cover had all the standard information of any book, even though it was clearly made from a cheap notebook you could buy at the 100-yen store. Izuku read the lines in Karai-sensei's precise, flowing handwriting multiple times. Finally, he read them aloud to see if that would make them make sense. Welcome to the Moon Crown, an initiate's guide to the mystic arts. Written by Unknown. Translated by the Ancient One. Little did Midoriya Izuku know that his whole world was about to change. Where until that point he'd believed superpowers were something you were born with, after he finished the book for the second time past midnight, he realized the truth. There was a superpower you could learn, and it was called the mystic arts. Or, in other words, magic. Zuko was bouncy and agitated all through breakfast the morning after his graduation party from kindergarten. His mother felt the need to comment on it. Is everything okay, baby? You seem awful squirrely this morning. Oh, nothing. Just really want to talk to Karai-sensei about that book she gave to me. It was a real page-turner, Izuku said, trying to wave off his excitement. What was it about? Inko asked, curious what recorded thought or knowledge would have such an effect on her child. It was sort of an introduction manual for that monastery she trained at, the Kamartage, Izuku said. He wasn't lying. That had been what the book had boiled down to. What had him ready to vibrate out of his pants was the fact that the Kamartage, assuming the book hadn't been a total crock or meant to be fictional, had been where actual sorcerers had learned and trained to do magic. And something in his gut told Izuku that Karai-sensei wouldn't have gone to the trouble of translating the original for him just to give him a laugh or a wild bedtime story. There had always been something more to Karai-sensei. Her sheer presence, the total mastery she exhibited of both her body and her mind, how old and full her eyes could look at times. And now that Izuku had the idea in his head, He could swear that there had been other hints that his sensei was really supernatural or magical. Little lights or sparks that flashed at the corner of his eye or when she thought he wasn't looking. How unnaturally tasty her personal tea blends could be, because really, Karai Sensei's tea was more delicious than most soft drinks designed to get you hooked on the taste. And there was that time he'd had a short nap at her bookstore, and when he was waking up, he could swear he'd heard her pets having an argument over who got the sunny spot. The point was, Izuku needed to meet with Karai Sensei and get a straight answer on whether the mystic arts described in the book were real. Whether there really was an art/science to borrowing energy from other dimensions to hack reality and bend the world to your whim. If there was a way for even a quirkless person to get the power to be a hero. Well, we're due to go over there around 9 o'clock. You still have about an hour in travel time before you can see her. If you can't sit still, maybe do some drills or a light workout, Inko suggested. She was amazed at times at how athletic and studious her little boy had become over the past couple months since starting to train with Karai-san. She'd figured him learning to fight had been a childish urge or impulse, a fleeting interest. Instead, he seemed to have found something he was almost as passionate about as pro heroes. It was early days yet, but she could see nothing but good things coming from Izuku's training in almost every aspect of his daily life. He smiled more. He had more confidence. He complained less about homework or chores. It was remarkable. Izuku nodded distractedly and then went to the small corner where they'd set up something of a home gym. Most of the equipment was scaled for small children, though Izuku had observed his mother getting contemplative looks whenever he did his calisthenics or practiced his forms. She had visibly put on a little weight recently, not that he would be rude enough to point it out, and complained about how tight her old clothes were getting too. Stress eating, Izuku imagined, first from his diagnosis, and then her upcoming separation from his dad, and having to switch to full-time work to support both of them. Maybe they could start working out together. It would be a nice bonding activity, plus it was always more fun to do anything with another person instead of alone. Putting the thought of him and his mom in some anime exercise montage aside, Izuku did a quick warm-up stretch routine and then crouched underneath the pull-up bar that was really meant for adult dips rather than toddler chin-ups. Securing his grip, Izuku pulled his legs up from the ground. With a flex of his abdomen, he brought his hanging legs forward until his body was an L shape. Slipping into the zone he'd found helped best when doing any physical ordeal, Izuku began to crank out pull-ups at a slow, smooth, steady rate. He managed 3 sets to muscle failure with a break and stretch between each set. After the 3rd set, he went to the yoga mat and started doing his balance and legwork drills he'd painstakingly memorized after weeks of copying Karai-sensei's example in training. Karai-sensei had made it very clear not to practice any drill without supervision until she approved he had it close enough he wouldn't pick up any mistakes or bad habits doing them at home. She said practice didn't make perfect, but rather permanent. And what would be the point of making the wrong move reflex after enough practice, no? Izuku, time to go, his mom called just as he was about to work on his splits. Izuku stopped immediately, and without the distraction of exertion, he was right back to his extreme excitement. Okay. Izuku all but sprinted to the door and put on his shoes like he was going for the world speed record. The route from their apartment building to Karai-sensei's bookshop was technically shorter on foot, but Izuku's mom preferred to cheat with the bus. Izuku didn't put up a fuss over it, but he anticipated that once he was bigger, he would be running from his home to the shop and back before and after each lesson. Arriving at the antique bookstore tucked between a thrift store and a taxidermist, which Izuku always found just a little creepy when he walked past the door, Inko let herself and Izuku into Karai-sensei's business, as well as her home. Izuku breathed in the musky air flavored with hints of vanilla, almond, and florals from all the decomposing paper. He loved coming to Karai-sensei's shop, not just because it was associated in his mind with her lessons, but because the shop was just so cool. Welcome, Midoriya-san, young Izuku. Karai-sensei nodded from her workbench behind the counter. She appeared to be in the middle of slowly rebinding an old tome in Danger of the Spine, detaching and all the pages falling loose. I'll just be another 20 minutes or so before Wang-san comes to start his shift. Midoriya-san, feel free to help yourself to a cup from the pot before you leave. Young Izuku, go back to the garden and perform the entire first level of the Dance of Snake and Crane on repeat until I come to you. Yes, sensei. Izuku bowed, recognizing that Karai-sensei was still on the clock for her shop, and he shouldn't bother her with anything personal or related to training right then. And what was another 20 minutes? It might take him that long just to do the whole first level, anyway. He had the easiest routine of the Dance of Snake and Crane memorized, but he still had to think through each movement and stance as he moved, so his pace was rather slow. He'd seen Karai-sensei demonstrate the entire routine in under 5 minutes, but then she was a master and he was a mere student. Izuku gave his mom a parting hug and then went back to the fenced-in garden. His understanding was that Karai-sensei owned the bookshop and had bought the lot directly behind it at the same time someone in the past when she came to Mizutofu. She's filled the space with lovingly tended plots that grew fruits, vegetables, herbs, and naturally her personal tea trees. It was a little island of green in the heart of the bustling city, and by some coincidence, there were no windows in any of the buildings surrounding it facing the garden. It was perfectly private back here, the only entrance through Karai-sensei's shop or by jumping the 4-meter wooden fence. Izuku went to the spot of trimmed grass where he and Karai did most of their training that didn't involve any equipment. Izuku took off his shirt, shoes, and socks and tucked them out of the way. Then, after the obligatory wiggle of his toes in the soft, fragrant lawn, Izuku slipped into a state of focus and began the Dance of Snake and Crane. He was halfway through his second go at it when he heard Karai-sensei speak. "Stop!" Izuku obeyed instantly, born from genuine respect for his master. He turned and saw her. She was in dark gray robes today, which made her stand out from the green and brown surrounding them. "Karai-sensei," he bowed in acknowledgement. "Sit with me, young Izuku," she bid, going into size at her preferred spot on the grass. Izuku went into the same position, facing her. He wanted to talk to her about the book all morning. But now, at the moment of truth, he found himself hesitating. As always, she seemed to just know what was going through his head. "Your mother informs me that you enjoyed the book. Did you read the entire thing?" "Twice," Izuku confirmed. "I didn't really understand most of it the first time, but I think that was just me being resistant to the words. The second time, it all seemed to click and make perfect sense, assuming it was telling the truth." "It is good to question everything you read," Karai-sensei nodded, her eyes distant. "Let us see how much you have retained. What is the Kamar-Taj?" The Kamar-Taj, or Moon Crown, is a temple in Kathmandu where an order of monks have lived and studied for hundreds of years. The monks call themselves sorcerers and study the mystic arts, Izuku rattled off from memory. Correct for the most part, though it's now more accurate to say it was a temple. The original structure still stands, but with the collapse of the order, it's now just a building, Karai-sensei stated, an old grief in every line of her face and syllable she spoke. Izuku gulped. He'd never seen his master in such obvious emotional pain before. "What happened?" he asked. "I will tell you the tale in time, young Izuku, but it's not the kind of story that should darken the minds of children your age. Let us proceed. What were the 5 ranks of the Order of the Mystic Arts?" Karai-sensei asked, her face clearing and going back to teacher mode. Izuku frowned. "I thought there were 6, he admitted. "Name them all, and I will correct any mistakes you make," Karai-sensei replied easily. From the bottom up, there are the initiates, the novices, the acolytes, the apprentices, the masters, and at the top was the Sorcerer Supreme. Izuku said what he thought the answer was. "Correct. Your misunderstanding is that the Sorcerer Supreme was not a rank so much as a title. Their purpose was to lead their fellow masters, but they were never meant to stand above or be seen as more important than any other member of the order," Karai-sensei explained. "One more question. What, in your own words, are the mystic arts?" Izuku gulped. That's the part one had the most trouble with. It Well, for what the book said, it's a series of techniques and methods to take energy from the multiverse that wasn't being used and use it to do anything. The book used words like eldritch or arcane workings. It sounded like a really scientific way to describe magic. Which brings us to the most important question of all, young Izuku. Karai-sensei regarded him with her usual calm distance. Do you believe in magic? Izuku thought very hard about how to say what he felt on the subject. I want to believe in magic. And with some of the things quirks can do to bend or break the laws of physics, is it really so outlandish to believe? Still, I think I need proof. Karai-sensei gave a slow nod. Many do. Let me rephrase my question. Do you believe me, young Izuku? Do you believe I would lie to you about anything? No, Izuku said right away. You never lie. You refuse to answer or give it to people straight. That's just how you are, sensei. So, do you believe I told you the truth the day we met when I said I was quirkless? Kodai sensei pressed. Yes, Izuku nodded, sure of that. Keep that in mind when I show you what I'm about to show you, Karai-sensei said before settling her shoulders. She launched into a lecture with her usual sensei voice. The language of the mystic arts is as old as civilization. The sorcerers of antiquity called the use of this language spells. But if that word offends your modern sensibilities, you can call it a program. The source code that shapes reality. Karai-sensei brought her hands up from laying in her lap into an odd position in front of her breastbone. Then, with a sharp movement, she sent either hand in opposite directions, up and down. In the air in front of where she'd traced the air, what looked like glitter or a laser or some kind of tangible light appeared. Izuku's jaw dropped. He believed, deep down, that Karai-sensei wasn't lying about not having a quirk. And yet, she'd made that line of light appear out of thin air. If it wasn't a hologram, then the only explanation was magic. He was looking at magic right in front of him. A sorcerer harnesses energy. Karai-sensei rotated her arms in perfect sync clockwise, making the line move with it and more lines and curves forming from the original shape, drawn from other dimensions of the multiverse. Karai-sensei's arms crossed before she sent them sideways sharply with a snap at each end. A box formed around the rapidly forming mandala-like shape inside, all still made from that unearthly light. To cast spells, Karai-sensei kept up the elaborate arm movements, like an artist with their tools, crafting the increasingly complex glyph in the air. To conjure shields and weapons. Izuku couldn't take his eyes off the beautiful piece of art using a medium he never thought existed before. To make magic, Karai-sensei finally pushed both her open palms forward and the glyph started to vibrate, different layers of it separating to make it three-dimensional. A stiff wind started as if from nowhere. Izuku gasped as bits of grass and dirt and dust were sucked into and swirled around the magical shape floating in the air. After a few seconds of a mini tornado, the glyph flickered and faded away like a candle flame dying. Izuku felt tingles all over his body. It's real. Magic is real. He breathed in awe. That is true. Young Izuku, Karai-sensei nodded. Her face became more open, both proud and somehow troubled. When we first met, I only desired to teach you the art of self-defense. Over the weeks, though, I saw something in you. Your first instinct is always to help, to stand up for what's right. You have a good head on your shoulders, a good heart, and more determination than most. My intuition leads me to believe you would be quite suited to learning the mystic arts, as well as the warrior mystic style. So, I translated the book I once read so long ago and gave it to you yesterday as a sort of test. You have proven yourself open to the idea of magic, and now you know beyond doubt it is the truth. So, are you going to teach me the mystic arts too? Izuku asked eagerly. Karai-sensei actually bit her lip. I want to. I have faith that you would use them for good. I only hesitate because I feel reluctant to inflict the burden of all that terrible knowledge and responsibility upon you. What do you mean, sensei? Izuku frowned, wondering what the problem was. There are reasons the order dissolved, young Izuku. Power corrupts. This is proven true throughout history, and certain individuals will always give into corruption for their own reasons. A number of sorcerers have gone dark, taking the mystic arts and abusing them horribly to suit their own desires and goals. But another truth is that ignorance is bliss. The inverse holds true as well. To quote the Bible, "In much wisdom is much grief, and he that increases knowledge increases sorrow." To learn the mystic arts is to open yourself up to all the beauty, but also all the ugliness, all the good and all the bad, all the angels and all the demons of the multiverse. And there's no going back once you open some doors. Karai Sensei had never looked so old. There's so much to be afraid of in the world, and other worlds beyond this one, and worlds within other worlds. Fear enough to drive lesser minds insane. Even for those who can bear the strain, it is an eternal toll that must be paid. Izuku gulped, crunching on that. So you're saying that learning the mystic arts could break me? As I have repeatedly told you, young Izuku, I am older than I look. I have taught dozens upon dozens of students throughout the course of my lifetime. Some thrived, surpassing even myself. Some went dark, and some crumbled, twisted and warped by secrets they were not ready to know and perhaps never would have been. The fault for all the lives destroyed by the mystic arts lies in part on my shoulders. I have a good feeling about you, dear boy, but still I could be wrong. And something tells me that if you lost your way once you start this journey, the results would be worse than any others. Izuku felt a chill run down his spine. Karai-sensei, you're scaring me a little. I'd be concerned if you weren't, she said bluntly. And yet, I cannot take away your power to make your own choice. I can only offer you what information I can, and the action afterwards is entirely up to you. So now I offer you 3 options, young Izuku. Option 1. I remain only your mentor for the warrior mystic style. You find some way to accept that magic is real, but will be beyond your grasp by your own decision. Option 2. I take you as my apprentice in full. I will instruct and guide you on your personal journey into the world of monsters and magic, sorcery and spells, divine and demonic, no matter where it takes us both. Or option 3. I can make you forget. I can erase all the memories you have of everything involving myself or anything related. The same for your mother. And then you can return to the life you would have led had we never crossed paths. Decide with care. Izuku looked down. His first impulse was to go with option 2, of course. But Karai-sensei had made it very clear that the mystic arts wasn't all sugar and rainbows. Option 3 was no option at all. Karai-sensei wasn't just his teacher. She was the only friend he had in the world. He wouldn't give her up for anything, not even an autograph from All Might. And really, what kind of life would he have led without the gift she'd given him already? Forever in Katsuki's dark shadow, lacking any spine or self-esteem, having nothing but a dream of being a hero, yet lacking any drive to better himself and make it come true. So no, it had to be option 1 or option 2. May I ask you a few more questions? Izuku checked. I welcome it, Karai-sensei nodded. Why did you want to learn magic? Why did you decide to pursue the mystic arts personally? Izuku asked. Korai-sensei sait. I was taught some simple tricks and charms by my mother, who'd learned from her mother, and so on going back generations of my bloodline. I hungered for more than she could provide, and so I set out to explore the world for all the magic I could find. I ended up at the Kamar Taj, and it was like a starving woman finding an endless feast. I dived headfirst into it all, relishing every challenge and obstacle for the chance to prove my own ability and competence, to satisfy my need to know all the secrets and wonders of the mystic arts. I climbed too far too fast, though, and I suffer the consequences to this day. Time and age have brought a certain wisdom, and I am now content with what I already know. I stopped seeking to improve and instead to maintain only what I had gained thus far. I think part of me preserved all my knowledge so that one day I could meet someone special and pass it on to them. They would go on to climb farther than I ever did, avoiding the pitfalls I had made. Or perhaps it was simply a case of flying too close to the sun and making myself comfortable where I landed. To give you a clear answer, Young Izuku. I learned the mystic arts because I wanted to know why. I didn't desire the power for its own sake, merely to understand the sacred mysteries of the multiverse and how it all works. Karai-sensei finished her monologue. Izuku nodded, absorbing as much of that as he could. Are the mystic arts dangerous? He moved on to the next question. Will working with them get me in trouble? Or the people I care about? Anything can be dangerous done wrong. Young Izuku. Karai-sensei said solemnly. The mystic arts, though, do indeed carry a great many risks. I will not lie to you, some are lethal. There are sorcerers who got themselves killed, or worse, by botching a spell, or interfering in affairs they had no business in. There are beasts and beings attracted to sorcery, drawn towards workings of energy like moths to flame. The more proficient you become, the more likely you will draw unwanted attention from extra or interdimensional entities. And the higher you rise, the more who will fear you and wish to drag you down somehow. All of that also applies to the people close to you, as well as random people who will be caught in the crossfire. If you choose to learn the mystic arts, you will have to defend yourself from someone or something that will have problems with you being a sorcerer. That is certain. Izuku hummed. He was pretty sure which way he was leaning, but he still had a couple questions. Is it worth it? I can't answer that for you, young Izuku. I know you well, but I cannot predict how you will feel if you decide to go through with this. Whether you will feel more gratitude or regret, Karai-sensei sighed. Speaking for myself, in many ways, yes. And yet in some ways, no. If I could unmake the past and have never come to the Kamartage and learn the things I know now, I honestly can't say whether or not I would. Make of that what you will. Though I will say that all the good I've done, however much that is in the grand design, would not have been possible without the mystic arts. In a way, that made it even more confusing. Yet one last question had to be asked. If I learned the mystic arts, could I become a hero? Karai-sensei got a fond, slightly exasperated grin. Yes, Izuku. You could become a hero, perhaps even a pro-hero. There would be problems to solve, issues to address, but it's entirely possible you could take the mystic arts and use them to combat villainy and defend the innocent. But remember, the reverse is also true. It's possible that you could become a villain with the power of magic. And there are things in the multiverse that would want that to happen and strive to corrupt you. Or you could simply crack under the weight of certain knowledge and become a different person, one who wants to punish rather than protect. I cannot overstate this. The mystic arts can change people. It can make them so much better, but also so much worse. Consider that as you decide. Izuku took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He tried to detach from his racing thoughts and turbulent emotions, from his physical body apart from his breathing, and come to the quiet place inside. He had trouble finding it still, and he couldn't stay there long before getting distracted and pulled out by something. Still, he found he made his best decisions and did his best work when it all began from this center space. What should I do? Izuku said into the stillness of his soul. The answer came like a compass needle pointing north. It seemed so obvious. So Izuku opened his eyes and spoke his truth before he could second-guess it. I pick option 2, Karai-sensei. Teach me everything about the mystic arts. And please take good care of me. He bowed his head low. Karai-sensei got a bittersweet smile. So be it. Now, for your first lesson, let me show you the multiverse. She reached forward and pressed her thumb to his forehead. And out of nowhere, Izuku was flying. On a silver wind past the stars, his naked spirit was cast from its mortal shell and exposed to the infinite majesty of the multiverse. A bridge of rainbow light stretched endlessly forwards, backwards, and in directions he hadn't known existed, could not have known while bound by his earthly limits. They led him past, through, and around worlds without end. Worlds that were so benevolent and full of life that they made him weep in joy and bliss. Other worlds so dark and rife with malice that scared the crap out of him. More worlds so strange, so chaotic or so orderly they defied the powers of his mind to comprehend. Dead worlds, worlds dying, worlds worse than dead, worlds being born, worlds making more worlds, worlds transcending to planes beyond even his expanded sight. It was more fantastic than any dream, yet more real than any waking experience he'd had in his life. He had been blind, but now he could see. Who was he? Was he Midoriya Izuku? Was he a human boy? Was he even a he? Whatever he was, it was somehow both a microscopic speck and yet a crucial piece in this vast, never-ending, ever-expanding thing that was the sum of creation. And for just the briefest moment, Izuku felt the gaze of someone above everything he'd seen thus far settle on him with a gentle, loving curiosity. But then he was gasping awake, back in Karai-sensei's garden, soaked with sweat and out of breath. In that moment, as his spirit reoriented itself back in his body, he knew he could never go back to who he was before. Like a caterpillar metamorphosed into a butterfly, that voyage through the multiverse had transformed him into a different version of himself. He had been smashed to smithereens, some parts of Izuku lost forever and whole new ones suddenly available. It would be up to him how he put it all together again. Karai-sensei pulled back her hand. That was intense, more so than I expected. You seem to have a powerful soul, young Izuku. You saw more than most do on their first trip. You even caught the attention of something very powerful. How are you? Do you need anything from me? Izuku regained control of his breathing, then gave a grin so wide it hurt his cheeks. I could use a cup of tea, and then I need you to teach me how to do that again by myself. Karai-sensei somehow gave a happy smile with sad eyes. By the Vishanti, I pray you do better than I ever did. Very well, young Izuku. They got up, and Karai-sensei took him back to her kitchen on the second floor of the bookshop. Crookshanks, Heen, and Archimedes all greeted him with their particular animal sounds. No need to hide anymore, my friends. He has become my true apprentice and already traveled through the multiverse, Karai-sensei said even as she began the elaborate ritual of preparing a cup of her own tea for her pupil. Finally, if I had to cough out who one more time, I was going to fly off to Bermuda, came out Archimedes the owl's beak, sounding like a cantankerous grandpa. Speak for yourself, you old bat. Talking in human language is more trouble than it's worth for some of us. Crookshanks the cat rolled her eyes. Izuku, good luck learning magic. If you play fetch with my red ball, I'll love you forever. Heen said brightly, smiling through his doggy mustache. Izuku grinned. I knew it. You guys can talk. Do you only know Japanese, or have you learned other languages? Do all animals speak the same language, or is it distinct by species? Can you read, or even write? Though I imagine writing would be tough, since you don't have opposable thumbs. Izuku got lost in the mutter attack, as his mom liked to call them, verbalizing his breakneck train of thought too fast and quiet for most to keep up with. Karai-sensei left Izuku to entertain her pets while she made them a pot. Izuku stopped with his rapid-fire questions and processing to sip his cup as soon as his sensei handed it over. He swallowed and resisted the urge to smack his lips at the delicious flavor. So, is this team magic too, or are you just that good at it? A little of both, Karai-sensei shrugged. I have been growing, preparing, and brewing too many times longer than you've been alive, Izuku, and I've gotten about as good as one possibly can get the process. But I do indeed imbue energy into all my plants in the garden. Tea is already full of healing properties from nature's influence alone. With the mystic arts, I can enhance the effects and introduce new ones into each individual tree. My teas were considered good as any other potion among my colleagues at the Camartage and others versed in the mystic arts. I've actually restrained myself so long as I've known you. All my best blends require ingredients from other dimensions, but most of them would have prompted uncomfortable questions from you or your mother had you not been aware of magic. Izuku looked up at his master. Who are you? And how old are you? I'm guessing Karai isn't your birth name. How bold of you to ask a woman her age. Young Izuku, she chuckled. My real name is reserved only for those I trust the most, and you sadly have yet to earn that level of regard just yet. Though I will reveal that for more of my life than not, I was known as the Ancient One, Sorcerer Supreme of the Camartage. You may refer to me as the Ancient One or simply Tao in private, But in public, please continue to use my alias of Karai. Izuku blinked. You were the Sorcerer Supreme? As in, the best sorcerer in the Kamartage. I was hardly the best. I simply had the most experience and a certain level of respect among the other masters. The Ancient One, as Izuku would now think of her, said with a light smirk. I led the order for many decades, perhaps longer than I really should have. Now there is no more order, and I am but a single sorcerer with a new apprentice. Izuku frowned. Okay, I don't need the exact number. But you're older than you should be, aren't you? You've extended your life with magic somehow, right? The Ancient One bowed her head in what Izuku realized was shame. There is a particular dimension that does not conform to the laws of time, as you understand it. In my arrogance, I enacted a ritual that would allow me to channel energy from that dimension throughout my body and so freeze me in my current age for eternity. Believe me, my student, I wish I hadn't. Yet it probably says something that I never attempted to break the ritual and embrace the release of death. And there were other consequences to the ritual that paid a very heavy price. But to answer your question, young Izuku, yes. I have had far more than my 70. Izuku blew out a breath. You were there for the dawn of quirks, weren't you? I saw the luminescent child with my own eyes. I attended one of his rallies and heard him speak. He built up quite the following with his fame and tried to bring an end to world conflict. Tragically, if predictably, he was assassinated for his efforts. Almost 200 years later, the world has somehow both completely changed and stayed exactly the same. Human nature persists even in superhuman society, it would seem, the Ancient One sighed, taking a comforting sip of tea. Is it true, then, that history is doomed to repeat itself? Izuku asked with a frown. The Ancient One hummed. Not quite. To quote a German poet, we're not going in circles, we are going upwards. The path is a spiral. We've already climbed many steps. Humanity keeps learning and evolving. Each generation, in turn, makes its mistakes, learns from them, and attempts to pass on their wisdom to the next. Some have been more successful than others, some outright failed, but on the whole, I do believe the world has become a better place over the years. The complication is that the stakes get higher and higher with each round of the game of life. 1,000 years ago, it would have been almost impossible for any one individual to render the Earth extinct. Today, all it would take is the right biological or chemical or radiation-based quirk, and that one person could kill us all if they were so inclined. The chance that one person's loss will result in everyone's loss just keeps getting bigger. But that's a bit beyond the scope of my control, and it does neither of us any good to fret over what-ifs. The best way to live life is one day at a time, neither haunted by the past nor wary of the future. Izuku rubbed his head. Yeah, I kept up with about half of all that. More than many people your age would understand. As I said, you have a good head on your shoulders. You truly are one of the brightest children I've ever had the pleasure to meet. The Ancient One grinned at Izuku. Now, finish your tea, and then we shall return to the garden. We have our regularly scheduled lesson for your warrior mystic training. If you expect to also have a lesson in the mystic arts worth the name, we should not delay or tarry. Izuku gulped down the rest of his cooling tea and hopped to the floor from his chair. I'm ready, Tao-sensei. I hope you are, he heard her say under her breath. The mystic hero. Izuku held his mother's hand as they walked to Aldera Primary School, more for her comfort than his. He was not yet 5, and yet in a way he felt much older and settled than even his parent. Maybe that was youthful pride or ignorance. Or maybe working with other dimensions was a fast track to maturity. He'd only been learning the mystic arts for a couple weeks over the break between kindergarten ending and the first grade beginning. Still, he felt like he'd grown and developed so much in such a short time. Being able to feel the fabric of reality in your hands had some, well, magical effects. It probably helped that he seemed to be a natural prodigy based on the Ancient One's words of praise and recognition. She said he learned lessons in hours that had taken some of her students weeks. And as Izuku was shown the secrets of sorcery and grew into his newfound power to reshape the world, on top of his ongoing martial arts training. He felt like he had gained an invaluable perspective. He was a sorcerer, a new one barely starting out, but still. That meant something both to himself and in the grand scheme of things. His mind, heart, and soul had been opened to a whole new world of miracles. His body, too, was getting stronger and better with each drop of sweat, blood, and tear he eked out of it. He had already come so far from the trembling child who had tried to stand up to Katsuki almost 4 months ago. How much farther would he go? He was eager to find out. "You ready, baby?" Inko asked as they reached the front gate. The opening ceremony was yesterday, so today was the first proper day of learning. "Ready as I can be," Izuku grinned up at her. "I'll see you at 3:30, okay?" Inko knelt down and gave Izuku a big hug, hardly the only parents seeing their child off at the school entrance. Older students walked past, either ignoring, scoffing, or smiling at the various displays of affection. "I love you so much, Izuku. I'm sorry I haven't always shown it the right way, but I do. I know you can handle anything they throw at you. Remember that." "I will. I love you too, Mom," Izuku said back, getting a little teary-eyed himself. He hugged her tight, then wriggled out of her grip. He dabbed his eyes with his hanky, and then, with a final parting wave, Izuku turned and entered the building. He reached his homeroom and found his assigned seat on the chart written on the board. He noted a lot of familiar names from his kindergarten class, including Katsuki. Well, that was to be expected. They lived in the same school district and all. But after being shown an obelisk pit in a scrying lesson with the Ancient One, his friend-turned-bully seemed less some invincible titan and more an angry Pomeranian in Izuku's eyes. It just wasn't worth being scared of the blonde compared to much more dire threats out there in the world, much less the multiverse. Izuku got to his seat and prepared for class. With a bit of free time before the bell, Izuku pulled out the beginner's grimoire he was steadily working through. Disguised with a charm cast by the Ancient One to appear as a regular children's novel. It was full of basic enchantments that required relatively simple applications of dimensional energy from the easiest dimensions to craft. It was even in Japanese, part of the Ancient One's private collection written by a sorcerer from the Edo period. His master had warned Izuku, though, that she wasn't going to personally translate all his assigned texts. He would have to become something of a polyglot if he wanted a complete education in the mystic arts. Luckily, a magically enhanced mind palace was one of the first tricks Izuku had learned. He now had practically photographic memory, and that was just the tip of the iceberg when it came to mystical hacks of the brain. His learning curve should be rather steep when it came to simple memorization of words and the rules of grammar for foreign languages. At the 5-minute bell, Izuku tucked a bookmark into the grimoire and sat at attention for the start of class. The sensei stood when the final bell rang. "Good morning, class." "Good morning, sensei," chorused Izuku and all his fellow students, some with more enthusiasm than others. "I am Kid Sensei, and I will be your homeroom teacher for your first year." The bright-faced woman with the start of wrinkles and gray in her hair somehow seemed to have more youthful exuberance than some of her students. "Today, we shall spend the first hour just getting to know each other. In order of student number, you all shall come up to the front of the class and introduce yourself. Just give us your name, your quirk, your favorite subject, and one fun fact about yourself. I'll show you how it's done." Kid Sensei cleared her throat. "Hello, everyone. I am Kid Yumi. My quirk is called Pick Me Up. My body naturally produces caffeine, so I'm always full of energy. My favorite subject is literature, and I have a weakness for Mexican soap operas called telenovelas. Please take good care of me." One by one, each new first grader went up to do their introductions. Some clearly had issues with public speaking. Others, like Katsuki, seemed to relish all eyes being on them. When Izuku's turn came, he walked up. He stepped over Katsuki's attempt to trip him without even thinking about it. He got a Kid Sensei and turned to address the classroom. "Hello, everyone. I am Midoriya Izuku. I am quirkless. My favorite subject is math, and I collect pro-hero merchandise. Please take good care of me." Izuku bowed, and he almost literally felt the shift in the class energy when the word quirkless came out. "Oh, well, good for you. Mirik, Kid-sensei said, and her smile looked almost like a grimace. Next, she gave him a helpful push back toward his seat. Quirkus teacher, that could make things complicated. Still, Izuku couldn't do anything about other people's prejudices apart from prove them wrong. He walked back to his seat, hearing but not listening to the whispers and murmuring around the room. The rest of the first hour after the last student introduction consisted of icebreakers to try and get them all used to each other's names. When that was done, Kid-sensei launched into a review of the syllabus for their year. Before lunch, they got to some simple writing and pronunciation drills. Izuku applied himself to the exercise with all the intensity he would give the mystic arts or his warrior mystic lessons. The Ancient One had explicitly stated that if he ever got so much as a D or fell into the bottom half of class rankings, there would be unpleasant consequences to both sides of his training. Lunch bell rang, and Izuku got in line. Katsuki cut to the front, and all it took was a mild explosion out of his palm to make all the protesting students back off. Curiously, no staff intervened. If anything, Izuku thought he detected admiration or approval at the use of a strong quirk. That. Technically, Katsuki had just broken public quirk usage laws, let alone the school code. Why was he getting off scot-free? Izuku ate alone, a small but unmistakable distance maintained between his neighboring classmates and himself at the table. Typical treatment of the defective population who didn't have quirks. Part of Izuku had hoped this shit would stop after kindergarten, but he wasn't too surprised even if he was a tad disappointed. He had to remind himself that the only thing he could control about other people were his own actions and reactions towards them. The afternoon class started, and Kid-sensei took them all to the library with the assignment to pick out one book to borrow for the week and write a short report about it. Izuku browsed the shelves and noticed something. On literally every shelf there was the same booklet, regardless of which section or author. Same size, color, binding, everything. Curious, he took it out and checked the cover. His blood ran cold. It was Destro's little manifesto, a version dumbed down to indoctrinate children. He knew, because he'd once gotten a copy as a gift from another kindergarten student. He'd been a third into it, finding it offensive yet interesting. When he reached the section about how boys and girls without a meta ability should be sent far away and put to sleep. This was like having Mein Kampf or the Chlorine in the school, and it was not so subtly placed on every bookshelf. What the actual hell was going on here? Izuku, wanting evidence, went to check out the book with the librarian and Kid-sensei. The former nodded in approval, while the latter got a nasty little grin on her face. Izuku got through the rest of the day, trying to keep focus on the subject matter. He left as soon as the bell rang, almost jogging to the gate. He found his mom, and he quickly got her to start moving back towards their apartment building. Izuku, baby, what's at you upset? Inko asked less than a minute into the walk home. Mom, I'm being serious. If a school has a government-banned book in the library, multiple copies at that, who should you report it to? Izuku asked with a frown. What book? Was it an adult book? You didn't look at it, did you? Inko asked in an instant panic. Not that kind of ban, Mom. There's literally over a dozen copies of the Mini-Meta Handbook in the school library. Just one could have been slipped in by another student or Quirkus teacher. But that many? Something bad is going on at that school, Mom. I mean it, Izuku explained. Inko stopped walking, freezing with a bluish cast to her face. Baby, please be joking. Silently, Izuku took the copy he'd gotten out of his bag. He showed her the cover, then opened it to show the library card taped inside to mark it as school property. Izuku had never really seen his mother mad. She snapped in irritation sometimes when she was cranky in the morning or after a long day. But she never demonstrated the kind of anger that showed she was ready and willing to hurt someone. Thus, it was a big shock to her son to see outright murder in her eyes after she realized he was telling the truth. Izuku, put that back in your bag. Don't talk until we get home. Izuku obeyed, and they finished the walk to their apartment in swift silence. As soon as the door closed behind them, Inko asked for the book back. Izuku watched as she took multiple photos of the book, especially all the signs it belonged to the Aldera School District. Then she printed several copies of the photos. Then she put the book and one set of Polaroids in the safe he wasn't supposed to know was in her closet. Inko looked Izuku dead in the eye as she finished securing the evidence. You did the right thing telling me about this, baby. Mommy will handle it from here. Go do homework before your lesson with Karai-san. Okay. Okay. Izuku nodded and proceeded to do just that. Mental note. Moms can be scary when their kids are threatened. That might seem obvious in hindsight, but Izuku felt the need to acknowledge it. The Ancient One was told as soon as Izuku got to her place at 5 o'clock. She sighed. Bigotry and hatred. A cancer that will never be fully treated, I suspect. The Meta Liberation Army was officially broken and disbanded decades ago, but you cannot kill or erase an idea once it's taken root in enough people's minds. You're not suggesting the Alder District is secretly a lingering cell of the MLA, right, Sensei? Izuku checked. I'm not, nor am I dismissing the possibility. Clearly, there is something afoot at your school, but that is for the police and government to handle once your mother makes an official report to the relevant authorities. Do not burden your thoughts too much with the matter, young Izuku. With all due respect, this is a problem for the adults to handle. Focus on your lessons and leave this issue to grown-ups, his master stated with clear command. Yes, Tao-sensei, Izuku bowed, and that was that, as they seamlessly transitioned to a review of the second level of the dance of Snake and Crane. Halfway through the second week of school, a few police cars drove up to the school. It was all anyone talked about that day after the suited detectives and uniformed officers went into the library and came out with multiple books in evidence bags. Keed shot a look of pure loathing at Izuku that day, assuming correctly that he was the one who'd blown the whistle. That Sunday, an official email came to each student's family informing them that Aldera Primary School was temporarily shut down pending a criminal investigation. As if that weren't enough, the local news ran a segment on how material regarding outdated, illegal, and radical extremist viewpoints have been discovered in the Aldera School District's libraries. Izuku had never seen his mother look so smug. That Monday, which he suddenly had free, Izuku went back to the playground where all this had started. In a way, it was where he'd met the Ancient One, and he would never be convinced that that hadn't been the best thing to ever happen to him. Izuku noticed it was rather crowded, especially for a school day. Guess other Aldera kids had the same idea with the unexpected free day. Oi, Deku, Izuku heard. Reaching for serene calm, Izuku turned towards the stomping form of his former friend. Tsubasa and Tasaki were flanking him. It was almost enough to give Izuku déjà vu. That's not my name, Katsuki, Izuku said back to the hot-headed bully. Katsuki froze. The hell did you just say, Deku? What you call me? I called you Katsuki. Would you prefer Bakugu instead? It's only polite to address people how they wish to be called. And I would prefer you call me Midoriya or Izuku, not Deku, Izuku stated clearly. For months ago, this boy had almost sent him to the hospital. 1 month ago, they'd almost come to blows in the park at the kindergarten graduation party. Both of those times, Izuku had felt fear. Now, he just didn't. He knew Katsuki had a lot of experience with actual fights, and that he had a potent, destructive quirk he wasn't afraid to use. But Izuku felt assured he could handle Katsuki, or at least dodge and run. When did I start to trust in myself? Izuku idly wondered. He tucked the thought aside for future contemplation and refocused on the boys before him with hostile postures. Katsuki stared at Izuku for a beat, then scoffed. Whatever, Deku. Like I give a shit what you want. Now, my old hag told me that you're the reason the school got shut down. The school was shut down for carrying prohibited books in the library, at least in part. I simply told my mom about it, and she made a report. Like they tell us to do when something's wrong. Izuku almost shrugged, but he didn't want to appear too flippant. That could provoke Katsuki's fragile ego and hair-trigger temper. Katsuki curled his fingers, and little sparks and pops started to go off. Not a good sign. Izuku recognized it as his way of warming up his nitroglycerin sweat glands. See, all these extras seem happy to get a free holiday. But if the school gets shut down, That means we'll all have to find new one. It might be too late in the year for us to get admitted anywhere else. Even if we do, we'll have to play catch-up with a new curriculum. In other words, you and your big mouth have made a problem for all these kids. And more importantly, me, you think I'm going to let you get away with causing trouble? Izuku subtly widened his stance and began to flex internally for his own warm-up. He could see this going south very quickly. Still, he attempted to de-escalate. Other schools will understand the situation and be accommodating to the transferred students. I only follow the rules, Katsuki. I did the right thing. A hero wouldn't have a problem with that, don't you think? He would when you cause a mess he has to clean up. Katsuki fired right back with narrowed eyes. I don't give a crap about the extras, but you messed up my education over some dumbass book that hurt your pathetic, crybaby feelings. I'm up to make you pay for that. The thing that really struck Izuku about this whole situation was that Katsuki believed his own words. He wasn't making excuses. He truly thought that Izuku was in the wrong here. That was so backwards it wasn't even funny. Still, whatever delusions Katsuki entertained, he still had means, motive, and opportunity to cause Izuku a lot of harm. Izuku did away with covert movements and got right into the opening stance of the warrior mystic style. We don't have to fight, Katsuki. Izuku gave his final try to talk the potential opponent down. Katsuki eyed his stance with confusion before rolling his eyes. Watch a few too many kung fu movies, Deku. It ain't gonna save you from getting your ass kicked. And hell yeah, we gotta fight. 'Cause I say so. Get him. With that war cry, Katsuki rushed forward, his two sidekicks following in his wake. All three activated their quirks, Katsuki making a smokescreen to blind Izuku, Tsubasa taking to the air on his wings, and Tasaki extending his reach with his finger lengthening. The Ancient One liked to give Izuku quotes from great thinkers throughout history. One, attributed to the Greek poet Archilochus, when we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to the level of our training. He'd been referring to how, in the heat of battle, where all was frantic chaos and pain and exhaustion, fighting was more a matter of reflex than intellect. Izuku wasn't good enough that he could fight without thinking, not even close. He'd only been training for 4 months, after all, but he had put in over an hour every single day since he'd started, and even a little training was better than no training at all. Having observed Katsuki in every childish brawl he'd ever instigated, Izuku knew to expect a big right hook. Even with the obscurity of the explosion's smoke, Izuku anticipated where the blow would come. He caught Katsuki's clenched fist, getting a firm grip and exerting enough pressure to stop the punch in its tracks. It took a lot. Katsuki loved to exercise and was about as strong as any almost 5-year-old could be. In fact, wasn't Katsuki's birthday tomorrow? Ignoring the random thought, Izuku kept Katsuki's hand in place and then balanced on his back leg. He timed it as best he could to connect the kick, pulling on the fist for leverage before letting go to finish the kick for maximum damage. He could tell he'd mistimed it even as he did it, and he almost overbalanced backwards, but the surprised oof of expelled air from Katsuki was still oddly satisfying. Getting his balance back, Izuku moved smoothly backwards to get out of the thick cloud of smoke. He didn't have extrasensory perception yet, and he couldn't defend from an attack he couldn't see coming. Tasaki charged where he thought Izuku would be, and tripped when he overbalanced without the expected resistance of a body to grab. Izuku heard pants of exertion and the flap of wings coming from behind him. He immediately crouched down, and Tsubasa's aerial tackle missed. Seizing the opportunity, Izuku pushed himself straight up to deliver a headbutt right to the chubby flyer's stomach. His neck protested at the impact. He hadn't tensed properly, but Tsubasa yelped in pain and tumbled into a somersault on the ground. Less than 10 seconds had gone by since the start of the fight, and Izuku already felt a big chunk of his physical and mental energy had been expended. Yet his heart was pumping loud enough for him to hear, his extremities were tingling, and he somehow felt a rush that made the high of a good workout seem like a trickle next to a roaring river. So, this is what a real fight feels like, Izuku mused. I think I like it. Katsuki charged through the cloud, looking even more pissed off than before. "You bitch! You dare!" He threw a curled palm right at Izuku's chest, the scent of banana from the nitroglycerin fumes strong in Izuku's nose. Izuku stepped to the side and twisted, so that Katsuki's explosion hit nothing but empty air. Then he grabbed Katsuki's wrist and started to put him in a joint lock where Izuku could pin him and the other wouldn't be able to escape without dislocating or breaking something. Katsuki pulled hard, harder than Izuku could match, and Izuku wisely let go and backed off even as the other palm came around to launch another explosion. "Quirkless idiot," Izuku heard clearly from his 8 o'clock. It was Tasaki's voice. Izuku bent forward, and the knife hand, more of a sword hand with a digit extension quirk, passed over his head. Sliding his foot back, Izuku threw all his weight into a rear elbow. He felt the thump of heavy impact, and then he straightened and tried to get distance from Katsuki, the more obvious threat. Part of him noted with detachment the sound of retching and a liquid splashing. Had he hit Tasaki hard enough to make him puke? Well, he could worry about that later. He felt a sharp blow to the back of his head, sending pain and disorientation through his skull. "Are you stupid? Why are you fighting back, Quirkless?" Tsubasa screamed. Izuku pushed through the pain and twisted with a roundhouse kick. He got Tsubasa in the side, and Izuku distinctly heard a crack. Oh wow, had he broken the wing boy's ribs? Well, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Izuku couldn't be bothered at the moment to care. As Tsubasa shrieked and fell to the ground, Izuku hopped back and tried to reorient back to facing Katsuki. At least it was one-on-one now, assuming neither injured opponent got back up. Katsuki was panting, his palms smoking and his eyes so wide Izuku could see the red veins at the edges. He looked at his injured allies, Tasaki moaning in discomfort in a pool of his own sick, and Tsubasa, already crying in pain, clutching his side. He looked back at Izuku, looking mad enough to chew nails and spit out paper clips. It was very frightening. Izuku would not deny it. "Where's this coming from, Deku? How'd you go from a total weakling to this?" Katsuki demanded, sounding almost unhinged. "I didn't like losing last time, so I got better," Izuku replied. He was putting up a brave front, but he was still dizzy from the unexpected head injury, and he was rapidly losing gas as the fight kept going. Maybe he could psych Katsuki out and get him to back off. There's more where that came from. How about we just call a tie? That was apparently the wrong thing to say, as Katsuki roared like an animal and charged forward. "No way I'll lose to you, DKU." He was in Izuku's space a heartbeat later, both his palms rushing forward to deliver a joint explosion that just might send Izuku to the ER if it made contact. Faster than he'd ever attempted it, Izuku bent backwards into a full bridge. He just barely managed to get his top half out of the way of the big boom, but the shockwave was enough to make him lose balance and fall to the ground. Still, Izuku knew that Katsuki wasn't immune to the blowback from his own explosions. He had maybe 2 seconds to recover and do something before the blonde took advantage of his standing position. Twisting like a breakdancer, Izuku got his hands and feet under him and threw himself at Katsuki's legs. Then it was like trying to grapple a rabid monkey, one that happened to have an infinite supply of grenades at that. Izuku was vaguely aware of a chant of "fight, fight, fight," coming from what felt like far away. That didn't matter compared to the struggle of trying to hold down Katsuki in a way that wouldn't get him second-degree burns for his trouble. And then a hand so big it must be an adult grabbed him by the back of his neck, and he was pulled up to hang in the air. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Time out. Break it up, lil listeners. You're doing some real damage to each other here. Izuku blinked. "Present Mike?" he asked incredulously. He recognized that voice. He listened to it every evening on the radio. "That's right, lil listener. Now, I will put you both down if you agree to stop this violent nonsense," shouted the voice hero, Present Mike. "Let me go. I was winning," Katsuki screeched. Izuku felt a shiver run down his spine. Katsuki sounded almost, well, deranged was such a strong word, but it was the first to pop into his head. Yikes. You got some fire, little listener. But enough's enough. Keep resisting, and I can, and will knock you out. I got smelling salts to wake you up, and everything. Present Mike directed at Katsuki. Fuck you. Katsuki snarled back. Yeesh, the mouth on this one. Izuku heard the pro-hero mutter. Then there was a shrill whistle. Izuku wasn't even the target, and it still almost knocked him out, the pain from his eardrums more intense than any hit he'd gotten during the fight. It ended just as abruptly. How about you, green listener? You gonna cause trouble if I put you down? No, Present Mike, sir, Izuku promised. He was lowered back to the ground, the grip on his neck loosening but not withdrawing until Izuku had his weight back under him. Izuku blinked, and then it was like the whole episode of the fight hit him all at once. He unashamedly moaned as all the physical feedback of his pain told him where he'd been injured and how badly. Damn, what got into you boys? What started all this? Izuku turned and saw Present Mike, in full costume down to the support gear and the gelled-up tuft of hair. He had his hands on his hips and was somehow, hilarious as the idea was, seeming to channel disappointed mom energy. Izuku took a couple breaths, licking his lips and tasting copper blood. Katsuki blamed me for our school getting shut down, said I was messing with his education. He, Tsubasa, and Tasaki took me all at once. I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did, sir. Present Mike sighed. Yeesh, and I thought my high schoolers were bad. I assume you four are all from Aldera, right? Why would Katsuki think you were to blame for what those bad teachers were doing, trying to poison you precious lil listeners with that Quirkus junk? Izuku sighed. I'm the one who showed the mini-meta handbook I got from the library to my mom, and she's the one who reported it all to the right people. Transitive property, or something. I started it, and now he might have to get a new school, and he didn't like all that trouble, especially when it was caused by the quirkless kid. Present Mike grimaced. Quirkless, schmirkless, you're a good kid, I can tell. Sounds like this Katsuki is a bit of a bully. That sound about right. Izuku couldn't find it in his exhausted, aching body to protest his ex-friend's innocence. A lot of a bully, actually, but he has a powerful quirk, so everyone tells him he's going to end up a great hero someday. He thinks his poop doesn't smell, and he can get away with murder. And he was a bit quirkist even before we got admitted to Aldera. The fact I'm quirkless means I don't count in his mind. Like Present Mike groaned. Well, I'm afraid I've got to call your parents and let them know about all this. Maybe even an ambulance. You all beat each other up pretty bad. Got a number? Izuku obediently rattled off his mom's and Mitsuki Obasan's numbers by rote. As Present Mike pulled out his phone and started to call in the incident, Izuku looked at the other boys involved in the battle of the playground. Tasaki was curled into a ball and glaring daggers at Izuku. Tsubasa was biting his lip and whimpering, eyeing Izuku with, wait, was that fear? And Katsuki was still dead to the world from present mixed sonic attack. Izuku couldn't help a tiny grin, even with how horrible he felt. 2 wins, and a tie by means of outside interference. It was definitely a better score than the last fight. Even if he got grounded for forever, this had been a good day for Midoriya Izuku. Izuku came away from the schoolboy showdown against Katsuki, Tsubasa, and Tasaki with numerous minor injuries, a rather humiliating scolding slash smothering from his mom in front of half the neighborhood, and a Present Mike pen from the man himself as a parting gift. A non-emergency ambulance had been called, and he'd gotten patched up. The EMTs couldn't seem able to decide between being impressed or disturbed that a quirkless boy had dealt such damage in an outnumbered fight. Tasaki's mom had howled when she'd arrived and seen her precious Pookie and threatened to sue the Midoriyas for assault. Izuku's mom had returned fire without blinking that she'd be happy to countersue, and that 3 quirked boys ganging up on one quirkless would be pretty open and shut regardless of who won in the end. Present Mike stayed around long enough to make sure everything went smoothly, posed for pictures, and signed autograph for his fans among the crowd of onlookers, then went back on his patrol route. Maybe I'll see you in about 10 years in my class. Lil listener, if you're this tough as a tot, you can definitely get into UA, maybe even the hero course. They're thinking of removing that silly rule that quirkless can't apply for it. If you keep your nose clean and keep up with your training, of course, had been present mixed parting words along with a thumbs up at Izuku when the boy went to thank the hero for saving him mid-fight. That ringing endorsement and encouragement was enough to have Izuku walking on air the whole way back home to his apartment. Inko sat him down once they were back and looked him dead in the eye. "Izuku, baby, tell me the truth. Who started the fight, and could you have avoided it?" "Katsuki and the other two threw the first punch. I just happened to dodge and counter," Izuku said honestly. "I guess I could have turned around and run away instead of fighting back. But, Mom, once you start running, they'd never let you stop. I don't want to be a coward. Maybe it wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done, fighting 3 guys at once. But I won't lie. I wanted to stand up to them. I didn't want to hurt them. Not really. I wasn't going to roll over and let them hurt me again either, though. That's my truth. I'm sorry for this, but I'm not sorry for anything that happened back there." Inko sighed and hung her head. Then she looked back at him and got a rueful grin. "Well, if you absolutely had to fight them, I'm glad you did so well. I'm very proud of you for sticking up for yourself, Izuku. I hope you understand why I have to punish you anyway. It's part of the mom code." "Okay," Izuku said, a tad morose. It didn't seem fair, but he wasn't the one in charge of this relationship. Mom was his mom, and she made the rules until he turned 18. Maybe even afterwards, he'd decide when he reached that age. "I won't ban you from your lessons with Kurai-san. That's really up to her once she learns what happened and how she decides to handle it. But no leaving the house without permission for a month, and you're on double chores too. If you were the type to watch TV or read manga, I'd take those away as well," Inko said sternly. "Yes, Mom," Izuku sighed. "Can I get them out of the way for today right now? I don't want to do them after the lesson with Kurai-san this afternoon when I'm all sweaty and tired." "Go ahead," his mom nodded, and Izuku went to tidy up the apartment. He already overperformed to standard for normal chores. Double chores wouldn't make that much of a difference. Being stuck in the house apart from visiting the Ancient One for lessons would be a bit annoying, though. He liked visiting the park or playground for fresh air and grabbing a handful of dagashi from the konbini with his pocket money on occasion. Still, it could have been worse, he supposed. She could have tried to ban him from his lessons, or taken away the radio, or maybe even spanked him. Count your wins, not your losses. After Izuku had done his best to ensure the whole apartment was spick and span, he helped his mom cook lunch. At a bit of a loss on what to do until the lesson at 5 o'clock, Izuku went to the bookshelf and pulled out his Sudoku book. He was still on beginner level, though he was nearing the end of that section and about to get into intermediate puzzles. He worked through the numerical games for a couple hours until his brain felt sore. With the time left over before his mom took him to the Ancient One's shop, he decided to meditate. Turns out there were multiple kinds of meditation. His teacher had started him out with basic mindfulness meditation, which was sort of the gateway to more complex forms of silent focus. He still needed to get better at finding his center, but the mystic arts forms of energetic meditation were just so much more interesting and fun to do. The Ancient One had introduced him to 3 different types of meditating to start gathering energy to fuel his magic. Chakra meditation was meant to help him use the energy stores of his own body, mind, heart, and even soul to fuel his spells. Universal meditation was on how to draw on dark energy and other ambient power sources from his home universe. An advanced form of that, he assumed, was multiversal meditation to access the infinite multiverse. Dimensional meditation was designed to help the user access the various dimensions that intersected and weaved throughout the multiverse. The whole universe versus dimension thing still hurt Izuku's head. The way he'd finally conceptualized it was that the multiverse's countless universes were like a series of bubbles floating in an infinite ocean. They could move, grow, shrink, bump into each other, merge, or even destroy each other, but they were distinct pockets of existence operating independent of each other for the most part. Dimensions, on the other hand, were more like the water they were all floating in with its own currents and rules. Some universes were more in or out of touch with certain dimensions, but no universe had no dimensions. Izuku's home universe, according to the Ancient One, had a higher than average level of access to more of the particularly useful dimensions for working magic. The one she wanted him to get most familiar with was the Eldritch dimension. It was both her personal favorite and one of the most versatile for spellcraft. It was basically a realm of infinite, raw power that could be shaped to do almost anything, and it interacted very well with other forces for more complex rituals that required multiple sources of energy. It was the one she'd used to make the mandala that had convinced him that sorcery was real and not a fantasy. Still, while universal or dimensional meditation would be more exciting, Izuku's mom might make a fuss if she started floating in the lotus position or glowing with otherworldly sparks of light. So he sat down on a yoga mat and focused on finding, opening, and balancing his 7 chakras. The goal was to keep all of them in perfect alignment at 100% output. The same way most mountain climbers had the goal of climbing Mt. Everest someday. Izuku knew he was a long way off from reaching that point, but the journey of 1,000 miles and all that. Apparently, it was an accomplishment. He could even feel all 7 of them already, based on his sensei's hard-won approval the last time she tested him. Izuku settled into box breathing. In through the nose for 4, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 4, hold for 4, etc. Getting into the rhythm. He closed his eyes and worked from the base of his spine to the top of his skull, finding the rainbow stars studded at certain points along the way. Solars seemed to have grown since the last time. His victory in the fight must have been good for his sense of personal power. Root was easier to open this time too. Must have worked through some deep-seated fear by coming out on top, or at least not outright losing against Katsuki. Heart and throat seemed a bit crooked though. Wonder how that happened. Sacral remained his weakest for some reason. Third, I was still glowing bright and strong. He was pleased to see. And crown was the most difficult to work with, though Izuku was convinced it would never fully close ever. Not since his spirit had flown through the sea of worlds. He didn't just believe or have faith in magic and miracles and higher powers. He had absolute trust that they were real. He'd even started sending out prayers before bed to that unknown entity that had briefly held him in its palm right at the end of his astral journey. What was the harm? It had felt like a nice, whatever it was during their encounter. He could afford to send good vibes and intentions out to it. If he got something in return, that would be nice, but it was just what felt right and proper to Izuku, recognizing at least one divine being was definitely out there and had his best interests at heart. Izuku, we have to catch the bus, baby. He heard his mother gently nudge him out of his trance. Izuku opened his eyes, swiftly changed into pants appropriate for training, and went to join his mother on the commute to his teacher's place of business/residence. They got there to find the Ancient One waiting with a pot of tea, ready to greet them both. She flipped the closed sign on the door after letting them in. "What happened?" she asked, regarding Izuku with narrowed eyes. He was still wearing bandages, and some of his bruises were starting to get dark. Round 2 with Katsuki finally happened today, Kurai-sensei, Izuku answered, using her Japanese alias while his mom was still there. I do hope you didn't instigate or provoke the conflict in any way, young Izuku," the Ancient One said with a severe tone. "I failed to talk him down, but I don't really think I could have. He came ready for a fight. He just got a rude surprise that it wasn't as easy as last time." Izuku shrugged. "We were wrestling on the ground after I took out his 2 friends. Present Mike was passing by and had to break it up himself. Considering how unfair the odds were, I think I did pretty good." Well, all's well that ends well, I suppose. Though do you think young Katsuki will react well to not achieving overwhelming victory as he expected?" The Ancient One poured them all some tea. This particular blend, she flavored with a squeeze of fresh lemon juice cut with a sprinkle of cane sugar. Masaru Ajisen had to hold him back from trying to start round 3 when he regained consciousness. Izuku frowned even as he savored the aroma of the plant-infused water. It was shameful, really. I thought Mitsuki and Masaru were better parents than that. Or maybe little Katsuki is just a bad kid. I don't know. I just know that no boy should use that type of language or be that angry over losing. Inko sniffed. He was acting more like a feral dog than a human being. He even bit his father to try, and make him let go. I barely recognized him compared to the sweet little toddler that was my baby's best friend. The only constant is change. People in particular are susceptible, in my view. Though, is there perhaps a medical explanation for young Katsuki's violent temperament? You say his quirk is to produce nitroglycerin-like sweat from his hands, correct? Nitroglycerin isn't just an explosive, it's a cardiac drug. Could he be affected adversely by his own biology, since his quirk manifested? The Ancient One posed to the Midoriya family. Inko gasped. Oh, I never thought of it that way, but that makes sense. No guarantee his quirk includes immunity to the side effects of nitroglycerin introduced into the bloodstream. I'll tell Mitsuki about it and recommend she consult a different quirk counselor than last time. If it's really just that he's not getting the medicine he needs, I suppose I can't fault him too much for his behavior. Still doesn't make what he's done to my baby right, but I'd rather the issue be corrected than left ignored. Izuku hummed after he sipped the delightfully tart, sour-sweet tea. I mean, I like to think it'd be as easy a fix as taking a pill to make him less, well, explosive. But he's still gotten it into his head that his quirk makes him better than others and give him certain privileges. He might need an anger management class or even a therapist to deal with his twisted idea of might makes right. Well, it's really up to his parents and young Katsuki himself to deal with. We can offer advice, but it's up to them to take it or follow through on it. Let us focus on matters closer to home, the Ancient One stated firmly. Izuku, will you be able to perform for your lesson today, or shall we focus more on the academic side of your training until you recover fully? I'm sore as all get out, but I didn't sprain, strain, or break anything. We can do the lesson like usual, sensei, Izuku asserted. Very well, the Ancient One nodded, a note of approval in her voice. I normally just go browsing or to the library nearby while you have your lessons. But could I watch today? I missed the fight, and I'm curious to see my baby in action apart from what I see him do back at home, Inko requested. Is that something you'd be okay with, Izuku? The Ancient One checked with him. Izuku knew if his mom was there, then there'd be no mystic arts lesson today, only the warrior mystic style. Still, part of him wanted his mom to see how hard he was working on bettering himself and learning self-defense. Sure thing. They finished drinking their tea and then went to the garden out back. It was unseasonably warm for April, and the Ancient One offered a wooden fan to Inko to make a personal breeze. Keeping her own open and fluttering with frequent twists of her hand, the Ancient One had Izuku take off his shirt, shoes, and socks as per usual. Inko seemed pained when she saw the tapestry of bruises, scrapes, and mild burns covering her son's upper body. Izuku paid it no mind, though. He'd survived, and it all would heal in time, especially if he had access to his sensei's magically restorative teas that were enriched with magical energies. First and second level of the dance of snake and crane back-to-back to start with. Complete it in a timely manner without mistake, and I will consider introducing you to the third level today, the Ancient One instructed Izuku. What's the dance of snake and crane? Inko asked from the sidelines, even as Izuku took the opening pose and began to flow through the complex, full-body routine. The same principle as Vinyasa Yoga, though it originates from the Kamartaj specifically and is perhaps slightly more focused on preparing the user for battle than simple general fitness or wellness. It's a mixture of flexibility and bodyweight exercises meant to be performed as smoothly as possible, as fast as possible, as though it were an actual dance, the Ancient One answered. There are 4 levels in ascending order of difficulty. One is considered competent once they can perform all 4 levels in sequence without flaw in under an hour. I do it myself every morning to maintain my strength and endurance. She can even taught me. Fit while you're together. Izuku chimed in through stuttering pants as he tried to gather enough spare oxygen to speak mid-workout. But it's not part of the kata for the warrior mystic style. Inko checked. It was designed as an aid to get the user used to complex, graceful movements and a supplement to their personal fitness regime. But no, Midoriya-san, the dance of snake and crane is meant to build the body up from within not protect it from being torn down from without. That's where the warrior mystic forms come into play, the Ancient One confirmed. And I imagine all the conditioning like the push-ups and leg raises are to build muscle in the first place. Inko nodded along, starting to see the reason behind all the exercises and drills her baby faithfully performed at home, even outside his lessons. Correct. On that note, we are reaching a point in Izuku's training where we will have to have a serious talk about his diet. He's young and prepubescent. But if he wishes to reach his full potential, then we will have to ensure he gets the proper number of calories and macronutrients in appropriate ratios. I'm not saying he can become a Greek statue before he reaches puberty, but past a certain level, the degree of training he does will start to break down his body rather than develop it if he isn't properly fueled for it. The Ancient One said, walking in a slow circle around Izuku to critically eye his form for any obvious mistakes. What's puberty, sensei? Izuku forced out as he got past the halfway point of the first level. 25% done and already out of breath. The dance was no joke. I shall not answer that without your mother's permission. Most parents are particular on when their children learn the facts of life. The Ancient One said with an actual chuckle, seemingly tickled pink over his question for some reason. Izuku, puberty is what we call the time when a boy or girl starts to turn into a man or woman. It takes a few years and starts somewhere around the time you're 11, give or take a couple years, Inko said, sounding oddly flustered. You'll grow taller and you'll have an easier time putting on muscle once it starts. Some other changes will happen around then too. That's all you need to know for now. You can ask again when you're older. Oh, guy, Izuku said, not seeing what the big deal was. So anyway, I need to start eating more. More of the right foods prepared in a healthy way in the right amounts. I won't go so far as to dictate a weekly meal plan for you and by extension your mother. Still, I'm well versed on the topic and can have a long discussion with your mother about recipes and ingredients and appropriate snacks between meals, the Ancient One nodded. Well, nothing wrong with eating healthier, Inko agreed. I presume he'll need a lot of protein. Roughly 1.5 grams for every kilogram of body weight, the Ancient One agreed. As a rule of thumb, 50% of each meal should be a form of meat or protein-rich plant. 30% should be a form of complex carbohydrate like brown rice or sweet potato, and 20% should be a healthy fat like avocado or unsalted nuts. Fiber is also important to consider. As I said, I can provide some helpful suggestions or sample recipes to give you a general idea of how Izuku or you yourself should be eating Midoriya-san. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with a light snack between each so that you are eating something roughly every 3 hours. A small dessert is permissible after dinner, provided it is properly portioned and not too sugary. Naturally, organic and freshly prepared is preferable to processed ingredients. She used her fan to indicate the whole garden around them. I grow a number of seasonal ingredients for my personal use in this garden, and I would be happy to share the surplus with you both throughout the year rather than force you to break the bank at the supermarket. Oh, I was just about to say, we're on a bit of a budget. Hisashi promised to send a monthly child support payment, but, well, you know how money can get lost in transit sometimes, Inko said with a grimace she tried to disguise as an awkward grin. Izuku almost broke form as he got distracted by the thought of his dad abandoning him and his mom for the sake of an overseas promotion. The Ancient One hummed. I'm sure he will honor his word, Midoriya-san. And in the event he doesn't, I'm a single woman with no dependents apart from my pets who lives well below her means. I have quite a bit of savings and investments merely accruing interest in the background. I'd be happy to chip in, as it were. Oh no, we could never impose like that. You're already doing so much to help Izuku. Inko protested immediately. Precisely. I would merely be ensuring my student was having all his needs met and could continue to learn without undue stress or distractions, the Ancient One said plainly. If it's a question of your pride against charity or a handout, that is of course your right to refuse. Just know the choice is there should you change your mind. It's not an imposition. It's a sincere offer of support from a woman with more than she needs. Oh, Well, I'll crunch the numbers and see if we can't get by on our own first. If we really can't, then I'd very much appreciate your kindness, Karai-san. Thank you so much for even considering it. Inko bowed at the waist. You are the best sensei, Izuku managed, even as he started to transition to the second level. Izuku finished the second level to the Ancient One's satisfaction. She had him review kata for half an hour, which his mom seemed fascinated by, and then launched into showing him the third level of the dance of snake and crane. By the time he'd gone through mirroring her do it at a pace slow enough for him to keep up, it was nearing the end of the appointed 90 minutes. Thanks for letting me spectate today, Karai-san. And for everything else, of course. I'll call you about all the meal planning and possibly a reasonable arrangement for the finances, Inko said as she and Izuku were heading back through the shop towards the door. It was no problem, Midoriya-san, but you are most welcome. The Ancient One nodded in acknowledgement. Well, we better get going or we'll miss the bus. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time. Inko checked. Actually, I have had a thought. Are you greatly attached to your current apartment for anything besides sentiment? I understand you work remotely, so you can effectively work from anywhere with internet access. And with the shutdown of the Aldera School District, commuting to whatever school Izuku must transfer to if it permanently closed would be bothersome. I have in mind a way to make all three of our lives more convenient if you are amenable, the Ancient One said, a certain playful slyness in her eye. How do you mean? Inko frowned. The loft upstairs actually has 2 bedrooms. The guest bedroom is used perhaps 5 or 6 days out of the whole year by visiting friends who take the time to come see me rather than the other way around. It's entirely up to you, but I'd be willing to rent it out to you and young Izuku for the foreseeable future. That would neatly solve a great many current and potential issues, don't you think? Izuku would need to travel no further than down the stairs and out the back door for his training. We can easily share food costs, which would make following a proper diet very easy for all 3 of us. And your conscience can be salved over the idea of me helping out by your providing the monthly rent. In that case, I'm not an overly helpful friend, simply a good landlord. It seems mutually beneficial across the board in my mind. The Ancient One was smiling as if pleased with her own cleverness. Inko's jaw dropped in sync with Izuku's. You want us to live together? They asked simultaneously. I hope I caused no offense. It just seems neater for all of us, but it's entirely up to you, Midoriya-san. The Ancient One bowed her head. I'll consider your generous offer, Karai-san. Inko finally managed, truly overwhelmed at this unexpected proposal. I think we know each other well enough to justify first-name basis by now. Please feel free to call me Tao. No honorifics needed. The Ancient One grinned warmly. Then I insist you call me Inko, his mom managed with a shaky grin. Well, we better leave, or we really will miss the bus. Goodbye, Tao. They said their farewells and got to the bus stop. Izuku lasted maybe 30 seconds into the wait before he couldn't keep his mouth shut anymore. Mom, please say yes. It'd be so cool. I could train more since there'd be no more traveling back and forth. We could drink Tao-sensei's tea every single day. I could play with Crookshanks, Heen, and Archimedes all the time. The school district here can't be any worse than Aldera. Izuku, baby, you're starting to mutter, his mother sighed. When Izuku managed to shut himself up, she ruffled his hair. Moving is a big deal, baby. There's a lot I need to think about before going through with this. I'm worried this is too good to be true. Izuku huffed, but he knew better than to whine or plead to try and change his mother's mind. Well, okay, but I'd really like it if it did happen. Noted, Inko said absently. The mystic hero. Almost 2 weeks later, his mom was still on the fence. In the meantime, Izuku felt he was slowly going insane from his grounding after the fight. Aldera was still closed while the investigation into illegal practices was ongoing, and Izuku could only exercise or meditate or study so much. He simply had nothing more he felt like doing once those were done for hours besides stare at the wall or listen mindlessly to the radio. It was getting to the point he was tempted to try practicing the mystic arts in his room, but he couldn't take the chance his mom would walk in on him casting. Besides, the Ancient One would tan his hide if he did spell work without supervision or permission. One Sunday afternoon, where Izuku had had his lesson in the morning instead, the Midoriya's phone rang. Inko picked it up, and Izuku worked out from her side of the conversation that it was Mitsuki Obasan. Inko's face lit up when talking to her old friend, but then it closed off. She visibly debated something before putting the former model on hold. Izuku, baby, would you be okay if we had dinner with the Bakugas tonight? I'm told Katsuki will be on his best behavior. Izuku was leery, of course, but he was getting just that stir-crazy that a change in scenery, even if it involved a shared meal with his ex-friend/bully, seemed appealing. Still, he wanted assurances. Any chance we can go out? I'd like there to be witnesses if he does something wrong. Good idea. Inko chuckled with dry humor before getting back to the call. 5 minutes later, she hung up, and they had plans to go to a local pizza place that evening. Not the kind with an arcade and jungle gym, but still family-friendly and with a decent variety of toppings. Then Inko got back to working on her laptop, and Izuku started his fourth 1,000-piece puzzle that week. They arrived at the House of Slice at 6:15. The Bakugu family had already arrived, so they bypassed the seating host to get to the right booth. Luckily, the two families were on opposite benches. If Izuku and Katsuki had sat directly next to each other, that would have been uncomfortable. It was bad enough they were face to face. Inko-chan, been too long. Katsuki had certainly gotten his boisterous volume from his mother, either through nature or nurture. She simply didn't care if people 3 tables down could hear her clearly. She was excited, so she would be loud by thunder. Mitsuki-chan, good to see you too. I hope you understand why, though, Inko said with a bittersweet smile. Yeah. My brat was being an ass to your brat. Believe me, he's learned his lesson, Mitsuki said, throwing an almost threatening glare down her son. Isn't that right? Yes, old hag. Katsuki ground out like the words were vinegar on his tongue. Katsuki, don't call your mother that, Masaru Wajizan scolded in his soft-voiced way. He was most definitely a beta personality to Mitsuki Obasan's alpha. Not that he was a pushover, he just was a pacifist. Fine, dad. I meant demon witch, Katsuki said without blinking. Mitsuki gave her boy a solid bonk on the head. You're lucky you're so damn cute. Hellspawn, or you'd be 6 feet under by now. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle. He was reminded why he'd liked the Bakugas. Never a dull moment, even if it was always more crude slapstick than wholesome sitcom. Hello, Mitsuki Obasan, Masaru Wajizan. Katsuki, I hope you've all been well. Oh, I missed you, Izuku-chan. You're always such a sweet little cinnamon roll. Mitsuki cooed. Though apparently you've gotten tough enough to knock some sense into my idiot son's head, where even I couldn't somewhere along the way. By the way, Katsuki has something to say to you. Don't you? She placed a firm hand on Katsuki's shoulder. Katsuki looked like he'd rather eat a live frog than do whatever his mother wanted. Still, he grit his teeth, looked Izuku in the eye, and bit out, I'm sorry. I was wrong to be so mean to you. Izuku blinked. Have you done this with all the kids you bullied, or am I a special case? He said a bit sharply before he could stop himself. Katsuki actually winced. Look, I'm saying it to you, Izuku. Those extras were just extras. But you were a decent side character in my story, and I wasn't acting very heroic up till now with you. I mean it, all right? So just say you forgive me, and we can go back to normal. Izuku practiced some self-restraint and took a few deep breaths to center himself. Apology accepted, he finally said, listening to his heart. But just because I forgive doesn't mean I forget, Katsuki. You ever start acting more like a villain than a hero again, I'll be there to stop you. Like you could. You just got lucky last time. Katsuki huffed, though he had a tiny, genuine grin instead of his usual cocky smirk. It was like the Kaken Izuku used to know before his quirk came in. So, can we be friends again? We could try, Izuku allowed. But it probably won't ever be the same as before. I'm not just going to be your cheerleader anymore. There's a certain proverb, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Think of me more as your rival. I'll be there to keep you in check and remind you you're not always going to be the biggest fish in the pond. And being your full-time babysitter to make sure you don't slip into bad habits will keep me on my toes as well. Keep dreaming, Izuku, Katsuki grinned, and it was a mostly healthy competitive light in his eye. I'm gonna be better than All Might when I grow up. But sure, you and your quirkless ass can pretend to be my Sir Night Eye. Fair enough, Izuku shrugged, figuring that was as good as he was going to get. Ah, they're just so adorable. Mitsuki squealed, breaking the manly moment like it was sugar glass. Oh, by the way, Katsuki was grounded right after the fight, and he didn't get his birthday party. Tonight is sort of a delayed celebration as much as a peace talk. So order anything you want, both of you, Mom/Shanny's treat. Thank you, Mitsuki Obasan. Izuku gave a small bow and a smile. I'm getting the brownie sundae and eating all of it, Katsuki declared imperiously. The waiter came then and took their drink order. Izuku was banned from soft drinks per his diet, and any tea besides a sensei's would just be disappointing, so he asked for water. I mean it, did your mom put you on something before you came? You haven't been this calm in a while, Izuku asked while they all were browsing the menu and debating which pies to get. Inko Obasan told the hag to get me checked out by a doctor, and turns out my quirk was messing with my head or something, Katsuki huffed, embarrassed to admit any weakness whatsoever. I gotta take some special medicine every morning, and now I'm not always so dizzy or feel so hot. I never even noticed how bad it was until it went away. Can't believe the first doc missed such a big drawback. Dad, can we sue him? It's been over a year since your initial core consultation, and the doctor missed it. Son, that's past the time limit for medical malpractice, Masaru Wajizan said patiently. I know, I checked. A lot. Even called up a lawyer Inko-chan recommended, and everything. Mitsuki Obasan all but growled. How dare that idiot miss such a big issue that would turn my son into such a hothead? Forget the courts, just give me a good alibi and a baseball bat. I didn't hear that. Inko, a paralegal, chuckled. And while I'm glad Katsuki-chan is getting the right medication to correct the problem, he still has some temper issues. No idea where he gets it from, really. Why, Inko-chan, don't be so mean, Mitsuki Obasan pouted. I'm cracking down on him. I really am. And I fully admit I turned a bit of a blind eye to how bad it really was because I didn't want to admit I was raising a hoodlum. But between the pills and having Izuku-chan's good influence back in his life, I'm sure everything will work out fine for Katsuki. Yeah, Hag Katsuki grumbled. We're getting the meat lovers, right? Maybe a supreme to get a few veggies. I actually might get a personal size for the shrimp and broccoli pizza. Sounds interesting. Maybe a seaweed salad as an appetizer too. We can always save the leftovers if we fill up, Izuku suggested. Katsuki peered curiously at Izuku. You didn't get soda. You're willingly asking for greens. Your arms have gone from twigs to medium-sized branches. And during that fight 2 weeks ago, you moved like you knew what you were doing, at least a little. Tell the truth, did you sign up for a dojo? Izuku was reminded that for all his brawn, Katsuki had a keen mind as well. He'd been reading before Izuku, after all. Not a dojo. But remember that fight way back in kindergarten, when you three really gave it to me? Tao-sensei found me and helped me get home and offered to teach me the style she knew herself. I've had a lesson every day since then. Guess it's starting to pay off. Who the hell is Tao-sensei? Katsuki asked. She must be pretty good if she turned a quirkless crybaby like you into a decent challenge that fast. Oh, do you mean that karai chick Inko-chan keeps raving about? Mitsuki Obasan interjected. The one who runs that dusty bookshop and supposedly makes bomb-ass tea? She lets us call her Tao. Pretty sure she changed her name when she moved to Japan. She said she's from the UK originally. Inko elaborated. Actually, the Ancient One had said she was Celtic, which Izuku took to mean, given her unaging status, that she had been born back when it was still a group of tribes and not the modern country. But that wasn't his secret to tell. Sounds like an interesting character, Masaru Wajizan remarked. She's awesome, Izuku grinned. I'm learning a lot from her. Not just how to fight, but how to be a good person and live a good life, and so much more. And she doesn't care that you're, quirkless? Katsuki checked, both rudely curious and maybe a tiny bit concerned for his regained friend. She'd be a hypocrite if she was. She's quirkless too, Izuku revealed. I've seen her feet. She's got the same pinky toes as me and everything. She's an excellent role model for Izuku. And she's so kind and generous, even if she's about as blunt as a brick to the face at times. She means what she says, I'll give her that. Inko chuckled. Believe it or not, she's offered to let us move in with her, even. Whoa, legit. Mitsukio Basin blinked. Why'd she do that? She insists that it would be best for everyone. She'll get rent out of an unused room. Izuku won't have to travel to and from her shop anymore, since he'll be living above it. We'll have access to her garden and can split costs on food. And apparently the school district for her part of town is much better than Aldera, which we all know is never opening back up. Inko listed off. Plus, I think she's lonely, at least a little. She's only got her pets and her part-time employees apart from us. Sounds like a dream deal. Why haven't you said yes, bitch? Mitsukio Basin raised her eyebrow in ultimate judgment. Inko sighed. Our apartment is, well, not ours, we rent. But you know what I mean. It's where Hisashi proposed. It's where Izuku took his first steps. Besides, isn't it a bit impulsive to move in with a woman we've known less than half a year? I don't get any bad feelings about her, but she still seems a little odd. Something about this just feels suspicious to me. And you got on me for passing on my temper to Katsuki. 3 guesses where Izuku-chan got his habit of overthinking everything into the ground. Mitsukio Basin snorted. But if you need a second opinion, how about you arrange a meetup between me and this towel lady? I'll get my own read on her and tell you whether I think you should platonically shack up with her or not. I'll pass along the request for a meeting. Inko blushed at her friend's evocative word choice. They ordered their dinner and slipped into just catching up with each other for the first time in months in person. Izuku was still a bit reserved with Katsuki, but he had high hopes that this second try at a friendship would go better than the last time. After they'd all stuffed themselves with pizza and Katsuki demolished his late birthday dessert, they decided to go for a walk to help digest their meal and keep talking for a while. They maneuvered through the evening crowds on the sidewalks towards the nearest park. Izuku blinked and then raised his hand to wave. Tao-sensei. The bald sorcerer looked up from where she was patiently observing Heen, marking his territory. She gave a fond grin when she recognized her student. She walked over, Heen happily finishing his business before scampering up to Izuku. Hello, young Izuku. What a coincidence. I don't believe I've ever seen you at this park. And who might your companions be? Good evening, Inko, she added. Good evening, Tao. Inko said brightly. You walk Heen here normally? Aren't we a fair distance from your shop? Since his last trip to the vet, I've extended our usual evening route to make sure he's getting enough exercise, the Ancient One explained. You're the one who taught Izuku how to throw a good hit. Katsuki asked point blank. I am in the process of teaching him. It's more a journey than a set destination, the Ancient One answered. She looked at Katsuki. Bakugu Katsuki, I presume? Am I to understand that hostilities have abetted between you and my student? We made up tonight, Izuku spoke up, or at least began to. Still feels a little weird, but he's willing to try, so I'll meet him halfway. I see. Well, I wish you the best of luck. But I do hope you set healthy boundaries going forward compared to before. The Ancient One raised her brow, just so. I'll stand up for myself more. He'll try and fly off the handle less. We'll see how it goes. Izuku chuckled. Don't suppose you brought tea? I want to see the Bakuga's faces when they try it for the first time. The Ancient One reached in her layered robes. Izuku was now pretty sure she used pocket dimensions instead of physical pockets to store things on her person. But pulling something out of thin air when you're quirkless would get uncomfortable questions asked. There's a reason the Order of the Mystic Arts had been a secret society. Some people had real problems with the idea of magic. Anyway, she pulled out a flask canteen that could feasibly have fit in a hidden breast pocket. If they so desire, young Izuku. Fair warning, this blend is heavy on spice. Perfect. We like spicy in this family. Bakuga Mitsuki, nice to meet ya. Inko-chan describes you as something like that cool cousin you can't remember how you're related to, but is still your favorite family member. Mitsuki Obasan said, brash and bold per the norm. Nice to meet you. Karai Tao, the ancient one bowed. She offered the canteen. Mitsuki Obasan waterfalled a mouthful and swished it around before swallowing. Hot damn, that hit the spot. November 10th. Inko-chan wasn't getting about your tea. Seriously, you could set up your own shop. Each leaf is personally grown and dried by my own hand. I'd exhaust my stock rather quickly if I set up a tea house, so I'll reserve it as a special treat for myself and my friends, the ancient one said with a pleased smile at the sincere praise. My thanks for the compliment, though. Masaru Wajizan tipped a small sip into the empty cap to get his own taste. Wow, I second my wife's sentiments. He nodded in recognition of a clear talent. Katsuki, of course, decided to take a long pull straight from the canteen. He sniffed. That's all right, he finally allowed, though his eyes were practically sparkling with delight. He clearly had enjoyed it despite trying to hide it. You may finish it, then. I wouldn't want it to go to waste, the ancient one said with mirth. So, what are your intentions with the Midoriyas? Inko-chan's practically my adopted sister, which makes Izuku-chan my little nephew, and I want to know if you got anything untoward planned if they actually move in with you. Mitsuki Obasan asked straightforward. My intentions are to make their lives easier and make our relationship more symbiotic, the ancient one replied without batting an eye. I believe life brought us together for a reason, and I see no reason not to do my best to help them out, especially as it will be to our mutual benefit. I offered to host them in my home since it seemed the way to bring us all the most happiness and solve the most problems. Mitsuki Obasan hummed skeptically. And what exactly do you get out of getting a single mom and her munchkin for roommates? It is my genuine pleasure to teach Izuku each new lesson. Ergo, having him so close and available will mean time for more lessons, and thus more pleasure on my part. I consider Inko a friend, and it will ease my mind to know she will have less to worry about financially since I'll charge less than her current rent whilst providing more benefits. I get a breath of fresh air into my home. It does get rather repetitive to only have a cat, dog, and owl to talk to. I hope you understand. And of course, there's the extra money in my pocket each month. The only potential downside I see would be a lack of privacy, and that's true of any shared living arrangement. Do you disagree? The ancient one prompted. Not at all. Mitsuki Obasan chuckled after a beat. Well, I definitely don't pick up any pedo or lezzy rapist vibes off you. You come off as just the sweet, eccentric old monk lady. No offense. None taken. That sounds accurate based on my own self-knowledge and what prior relationships have told me, the ancient one said with grace. Inko-chan, seriously, I take her up on it. But that's on you if you shoot yourself in the foot and refuse, Mitsuki Obasan chuckled, nudging her friend with her elbow. Inko bit her lip, then made her decision. We'll have to discuss logistics, of course. What to do with all our furniture when I can break my lease, setting up our own, getting everything from our place to the shop. Mom, you're having a mutter attack, Izuku pointed out, now with an inkling of how it looked from the outside. Then he glomped her legs. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is the best day ever. You're welcome, baby, Inko grinned, snapping out of her analytic spiral. I'm most pleased you agreed to this, Inko. The ancient one nodded with an air of satisfaction. I'll be at your door at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and we can work everything out between us then. I'll bring tea, of course. And there are certain things you should be aware of before you commit to sharing my home. Nothing bad, just some little details and foibles that might prove to be a deal breaker if they took you by surprise after the fact. Izuku caught the hidden meaning. Looks like his mom would be read into the mystic arts. He hoped she took it well. It would really suck if she didn't, after all. And it would be super unfair to the pets, and also him and the Ancient One, to keep such a big secret from her otherwise. He sent up a little prayer to whoever it was that he'd met on his multiversal trip. The Ancient One exchanged polite small talk for a little while afterwards, then left with Heen to return home. The two families made their own goodbyes and went to their respective homes. Izuku had trouble falling asleep, full of anticipation and anxiety about how his mom would take the fact the Ancient One was a sorcerer and had been teaching him magic without her knowledge. He nodded off eventually and was up over an hour before his alarm, so he was decidedly drowsy as he helped his mom prepare breakfast the next morning. Accurate to the second, there was a knock on the door at 8 o'clock. Izuku got it and let in his master. She had elected for plum, outer robes, lightning, to lavender on the innermost layer today. Unexpectedly, Archimedes the pet owl was perched on her shoulder. "Morning, Tao-sensei." Why'd Archimedes come along? "To prove a point," young Izuku, the Ancient One, said, and he saw what she was planning right away. "Morning, Tao. We saved a little Tamagoyki if you'd like." Inko grinned, coming to greet her son's teacher and her potential landlord. "I'll take those," Archimedes stated quite clearly. So saying, he flew over to the counter and started to dig into the layers of fried egg. Inko blinked. "Oh, I didn't realize Archimedes had a quirk. You don't often hear about animals with them, though I read it's getting more common." Archimedes is not blessed with a quirk. He was gifted the power of human speech through another method, the Ancient One explained. Inko tilted her head in confusion. "What method would that be?" "The same method that allows me to do this without a quirk," the Ancient One said. Then she held up her hand, which Izuku noticed had a sling ring equipped, and made the circling gesture he'd been practicing for days. A hoop of orange sparks appeared from nowhere, opening to form a hole in the air, through which one could see the Ancient One's kitchen in her loft all the way across town. Izuku eyed his mom watch incredulously as his sensei walked through the dimensional portal, grabbed a steaming kettle, and walked back into their apartment. She closed the wormhole behind her, then set the kettle on the table. With a flick of her wrist like sleight of hand, she pulled one mug after another out of thin air and placed them on the table. "Dea, what's going on? Is this some kind of trick?" Inko demanded. "The original kind. In point of fact," Archimedes drawled in a break from scarfing down his free meal. "I have not been fully honest with you, Inko. I don't have a quirk that is fact. I do, however, have access to powers beyond what you would think of as natural. Powers which don't rely on winning the genetic lottery, so much as being earned through informed effort and application. Powers which I have begun to teach your son at his own request." The Ancient One spoke delicately, probably recognizing her friend was having a bit of a shock. "What kind of power can be taught? If it's not natural, then what the hell is it?" Inko asked sharply, looking from her to Izuku with confusion and just a little fear. "Supernatural. It goes by many names. Witchcraft, wizardry, sorcery, thaumaturgy, evocation, divination, all different ways to refer to the same basic thing. I prefer to use the term mystic arts or simply magic myself," the Ancient One said calmly. "This isn't a joke, Mom," Izuku spoke up. "Magic is real. I've seen it. I've done it. Please, just try and hear Tao-sensei out." Inko looked at him like she'd never seen him before. "Izuku, you really think you could do magic?" "I know I can," Izuku said firmly. "Sensei, may I show her?" "Something small, young Izuku. No need to scare her more than we already have," the Ancient One said with regret at the necessity. Drawing inspiration from his mother's quirk, Izuku breathed deep and reached his spirit out to touch the eldritch dimension. In the paradoxical act of surrender necessary to gain control, Izuku let the dimensional energy flow through him. Thinking through the grammar of the spell he wanted to cast, Izuku began to wave his arms. He didn't let his mom's harsh intake of breath at the creation of a lime-green mandala in front of him distract him. Completing the floating glyph that described his intended hack of reality, Izuku activated the minor charm. The sigil began to vibrate, and one of the mugs his sensei had laid on the table smoothly moved across the wood to settle in front of Izuku. The geometric symbol of light faded, the energy spent. Inko pulled out a chair and slumped into it. She looked between them and the cup that had inexplicably moved of its own accord. She reached out with her own hand and made a grabbing motion. The mug moved towards her, proving it was physical and not a hologram or fake. She stopped and then just stared at Izuku. "Baby, why didn't you tell me?" "I forbade him," the Ancient One spoke calmly. "The existence of magic has always been kept carefully veiled from public knowledge, partially to protect its practitioners from being targeted or exploited, partially because there would be riots in the streets. The ability of a privileged few with access to the right knowledge to reshape the world to their whim is too much for some people to accept. I waited until I was as certain as I could be about Izuku's character before I even considered revealing the secret to him. I was equally as grave in considering you, Inko. You agreeing to my offer of living together simply moved up the timeline of your own introduction to the supernatural. So, magic is a thing. You can do it, Tao. And on top of the warrior mystic style, you've been teaching my son these mystic arts?" Inko asked haltingly. "Yes." The Ancient One offered no justification, just confirmation. Inko gulped and closed her eyes. Finally, she opened them, and something seemed to have settled in her bearing. "With all due respect, Tao, I'll need something a bit stronger than tea at the moment to handle all this. This blend actually pairs quite well with single malt whiskey." "Say when," the Ancient One prompted, pulling a decanter from her pocket dimension as casually as you please. Inko waited until the mug was half full before having the Ancient One stop. Then the tea was poured on top and into the other two mugs. Inko took a big gulp and blinked. "How is that still smooth as silk? Wait, don't tell me magic." She burst into a series of mildly hysterical giggles. "This is going well, I see," Archimedes said sardonically from the kitchen counter. "I can, and will give you back to Merlin if you don't behave yourself. I'm sure he's missed you," the Ancient One scolded the avian cynic. "When can I meet him?" Izuku asked idly, most of his attention still on his mother. "When he comes to visit me, or after you master temporal, scrying, and displacement to the point you could track him down wherever and whenever he is," his sensei replied. "Merlin is real too." "Of course." Inko shook her head. She seemed to reach deep for her composure. "Now, was there a point to telling me? It would be rather awkward if you found out when Crookshanks and Heen got into an argument the first time after you moved in or walked in on Izuku practicing levitation," the Ancient One said with wit. "I never planned to conceal it from you any longer than necessary. You have the right to know about your son's education, especially anything extracurricular like the mystic arts. As I said, us cohabitating just moved it up some." Inko nodded and took another sip of her spiked tea. "So, what does it mean exactly that Izuku is learning these mystic arts? What will this mean for him going forward?" "It means, with the proper training and suitably convincing falsehoods, that Izuku's dream can be attained. He could become a hero with the power of the mystic arts. Even if he for some reason were to change his choice of career, he'll still have the training to protect himself and any others in a crisis. I offered to teach him from the heartfelt belief that he would use these powers for good, not evil, and that he would thrive throughout the course of learning them," the Ancient One explained. "What makes you so sure?" Inko asked the Ancient One with furrowed brows. The Ancient One gave his mom a look of something like pity. "Really, Inko, don't you know your own son? He has great respect for the virtues of power and strength. Good values he lives up to. He's compassionate and selfless almost to a fault, and he relishes a good challenge. If anyone should get the chance to earn a superpower, can you think of anyone better suited than young Izuku? Be honest." Inko got that smile of maternal pride, which always made Izuku feel all toasty inside when he saw his mom with it. "Good point, Tao. I always knew he was special. But when he got that diagnosis, I guess I forgot for a while. And I'm sorry for that, Izuku. I only hope you forgive me someday for failing you like that." "I already have," Izuku swore. "Anyway, yeah, Tao-sensei is a sorcerer, and she's teaching me everything she knows. If we time it right, we can pretend I'm a late bloomer with some kind of hard light hologram or energy manipulation quirk. Or maybe I should keep the mystic art secret and only use them in emergencies. Present Mike might have been joking, but part of me really likes the idea of passing the UA entrance exam as the first Corkless student. We have plenty of time to hash out the details. For now, let's focus on the move. Thank you, baby, Inko said with quiet gratitude. Then she refocused on the Ancient One. All right, now that the rabbit's out of the hat or whatever, let's get back to business. What are you thinking for monthly rent? Utilities included or separate? Izuku grinned and sipped his tea, watching his parent and his teacher get into a spirited discussion on the practicalities of moving into the bookshop's loft. His mom was in the loop now. That would be a load off his shoulders. Next to worry about was probably Katsuki. Who, doggy, that could go sideways so bad. The morning of Izuku's 6th birthday, he was woken up at 4:30 a.m. by his personalized alarm spell. It was quite handy in that it emitted a loud, shrill tone that was inaudible to all but the caster. Izuku had even tweaked it so it wouldn't deactivate until he was standing upright. He gently maneuvered out from his futon tucked under his mother's raised platform bed. He checked he was out from under the ledge. He'd been burned before standing all the way up, making the alarm stop, giving him a headache. He moved with a silent, perfectly balanced heel-to-toe, rolling step to the door, opening and closing it as quietly as possible so his mom wouldn't wake up with him. He walked through the loft apartment they shared with his master, the Ancient One. He nodded in bleary recognition at the bald sorceress, who was making the first pot of tea for the day in the kitchen. One of the many unforeseen consequences of the ritual she'd used to stop aging so long ago was permanent insomnia. Something about the dark dimension's energy that froze her body while still allowing everything to function prevented her from achieving slumber. Deep meditation was the closest she'd come to sleep in centuries. Izuku knew how hard it was when he'd missed just one night's sleep to keep functioning the next day. He had no idea how his sensei handled the burden of eternal wakefulness. Then again, she was a certified badass. Maybe she was just that tough. Izuku got to the bathroom and started to fill up the tub. He brushed his teeth while the magically enhanced tap filled the receptacle to the brim faster than should be possible. Once it was full, Izuku braced himself. It said something that he kept doing this voluntarily every morning, but it still was torture up until the point he was already doing it. With well-practiced movements, he cast a spell to leach all the heat energy out of the water until it was only a couple degrees Celsius. Chips of ice began to form on the surface. Stripping out of his pajamas and putting them in the hamper, Izuku did his best not to think and just got in. Pins and needles sharp enough to pierce his bones ran through his feet and legs. He crouched and dunked his whole body below the surface before he could chicken out. He raised his head out of the water, teeth already chattering, and pressed the prepared electronic timer to start the 5-minute countdown. Ice baths had started as just a way to speed up his recovery time and reduce inflammation or soreness directly after long sessions of warrior mystic training. Something about them had gotten Izuku hooked, though, and now he started his day with one. He felt like there was nothing better to fully wake him up and fill him with vitality to tackle the day. Magic making many things possible that would otherwise be out of reach. The bathroom, larger than it should be for the record, also had a small enclosed infrared sauna, and the shower was enchanted to use blessed rainwater infused with energies for healing and cleansing of the aura, as well as the body. The various soaps were handmade and magical too, crafted by the Ancient One during her extensive downtime each night. The point was Izuku had no excuse to never feel clean and smell good. His hair, skin, and nails were also practically glowing with health. Just one of many fringe benefits of being a sorcerer. Izuku endured his self-inflicted suffering until the timer went off. Izuku eagerly climbed out of the tub after pulling the stopper. Focusing through the shivering, he crafted a mandala in the air and had it lower down around his body. Instantly dry once it reached his toes, Izuku took a moment to regard his naked body in the mirror before he put on the training robes he'd tucked under the sink last night. While still a child, his body was lean and mean and corded with muscle. His classmates still randomly asked him to lift up his shirt, during physical education to gawk at his visible abs. Izuku knew that it was unusual for people his age to be in such good shape, but he didn't see why it made the boys so jealous and the girls all giggly. He brought it up with his mom and master. Both had just chuckled, exchanged looks he didn't understand, and patted him on the head, telling him he'd understand someday. Izuku made sure his robes fit snugly before exiting the bathroom. "Good morning, Tao-sensei." He bowed as he reached the kitchen. "Good morning, young Izuku." The immortal woman acknowledged his greeting. She handed him a still-steaming cup of the pre-training blend they both preferred. "Happy birthday. Would you like your gift now or at the party this evening?" "Depends on what the gift is. Is it mystical or mundane?" Izuku responded. "Good answer." The Ancient One nodded in approval. "While it has to do with the mystic arts, it would not alarm our guests or break secrecy if I gave it in front of young Katsuki or your other friends." I am intrigued. So it will be nagging my brain all day if I put it off. "I like it now, please," Izuku decided. The Ancient One nodded. At the Kamartage, this would have been a formal ceremony involving certain rites that took the better part of an hour. I always found all the pomp to be gratuitous, so I shall simply get straight to the point. "I, your master, recognize you, Midoriya Izuku, for your skill and commitment to the study of the mystic arts. I hereby elevate you from the rank of initiate to the rank of novice. May your body stay strong, your mind stay open, your heart stay full, and your soul stay light." Izuku's jaw dropped. I am honored, master," he finally managed, nearly bowing 90 degrees over his cup of tea. "Quite frankly, this is a bit overdue. You've been learning novice or even acolyte level theory for weeks now. Your casting for almost every initiate level spell is practically flawless as well. And you're about as good at what parts of the warrior mystic style I've shown as it's possible to become at your age. But if you're going to be the personal apprentice of a former sorcerer supreme, I felt we should do it right. I presumed you wouldn't mind being held to a higher standard than the average practitioner." The Ancient One rose a brow in question at the end. "You weren't wrong," Izuku chuckled. "I don't mind if you train me twice, or 5 times, or even 10 times harder than you ever trained another student before. I'm not afraid of the work, and it'll make it that much better when I finally reach the rank of master someday." "I'll hold you to that, young Izuku," the Ancient One warned him. "Good, because I meant it." Izuku grinned back. "Drink your tea. If you thought training was difficult up until this point, you are in for a rude awakening. We got a lot to do before breakfast, so we better get to it," she instructed. Izuku sipped his mandated 3 cups about as fast as he could without burning his tongue and still being able to enjoy the flavor. He and his master left the dishes to wash themselves and went down the stairs to the shop below and then out the back door into the garden. The Ancient One had layered several protective spells around the garden, among them a filter against light pollution. Even though they were smack dab in the middle of the city of Mizudafu, you could see every star in the pre-dawn sky not obscured by clouds. Part of Izuku always marveled at the natural beauty humanity had blocked out in the name of keeping away the dark. And each time he tried to remind himself to appreciate the little things like this that made magic so wonderful. They reached the center of the garden, where they usually trained, and took off their slippers. Getting into identical poses, the 2 sorcerers began to practice the dance of snake and crane. Izuku knew that the Ancient One could probably do the full thing twice or even thrice in the time it took him to do it once, but she didn't seem to mind keeping to his own pace each morning. Still, Izuku pushed himself to get a little faster or smoother or more precise each day. Kaizen was a philosophy he could get behind wholeheartedly. Finishing the dance, his body fully warmed up and covered in a light sheen of sweat beneath his bamboo robes, Izuku bowed to his master to mark the end of the light exercise. "So, what's on the agenda for today?" "Catch," she said before pulling something out of her pocket dimension. He still hadn't gotten the hang of making his own yet. They either collapsed or came out too small to use for anything practical, and tossing it at him. Izuku caught the long, thin shape, and examined it in his grip. "Abaken?" he asked. The unarmed forms of the warrior mystic style provide a solid foundation and are useful in their own right for surviving combat. Today, we shall begin to explore the armed forms. We will cycle through the most common weapons over the next week or two as we explore where your natural talents lie. We will focus on whichever is most suited for you, with the occasional supplement of other armaments to keep you well-rounded. We will use physical training weapons for a time, until you are capable of conjuring and maintaining eldritch constructs of the same. I tell you in advance that if and when you progress to Acolyte, you will start sparring against a homunculus which I will create and puppeteer to give you actual fighting experience. At apprentice rank, the homunculus will start to cast spells as well as fighting armed and unarmed against you. Part of the requirements for master rank in the Old Order was to defeat either a homunculus at full strength or a fellow apprentice using everything short of lethal force, the Ancient One lectured. Izuku nodded in understanding. I don't suppose there's magical guns or other projectile weapons. A bow and arrows are on the list of test weapons. Actually, mystic bolts of energy serve the same principle as bullets, though they're more akin to throwing stones that happen to explode or pierce on impact. If you wish to modernize the mystic arts, you are free to experiment with making an eldritch construct of a firearm on your own time. Though good luck explaining to your mother why you're playing with guns at your age, the Ancient One tacked on with a quirk of her lip. "I see. Thanks for your blessing, but I probably won't bother now I stop to think about it." Izuku chuckled with a cold sweat on his brow, his knees weak at the thought of how his mom would react if she saw him toying with a magical rifle or something similar. "Should I use a one-hand or two-hand grip for today?" "You tell me," the Ancient One prompted. Izuku rotated the wooden sword in his hands. He tried gripping it like a katana and then like a saber. "If I hold it in my dominant hand, I could use a Tau Mandala as a buckler or shield with my offhand. Maybe I could even try dual wielding. Let's go with one hand for starters." Izuku finally decided after contemplating the issue for a minute. "Very well." The Ancient One held out her hand, and lines of eldritch energy appeared to form the outline of a scimitar in her grip. "Observe and copy, like when you were first learning the dance of snake and crane," she ordered before launching into whatever forms sorcerers of old had developed to use a one-handed blade. Izuku got his physical workout, drilling the initial style into his body until the light of sunrise started to brighten the sky. The Ancient One had him stop when she sensed enough time had elapsed, and they switched to the more arcane and academic side of his training. "How's your Russian?" she asked as he was doing some universal meditation focused on absorbing solar energy from the ambient sunlight. He'd gotten good enough at meditating he could juggle a simple conversation while still focusing energy. In theory, he could get good enough to gather and channel his magic mid-combat, no matter how chaotic or distracted or pained he was. It was just a matter of putting in the hours and progressing in difficulty. "I could ask for directions, but I might get slapped and forget about reading Cyrillic," Izuku replied. "I'll dig into it in my usual linguistics study for the next few days. What's my deadline to get fluent for whatever books you want me to read?" "I still expect your essay on comparing and contrasting Le Grand Albert's French and original Latin translations by the end of next week. You have 3 days after we finish up with Gallic folklore before we dive into Zagavori," his teacher decided. Achieving fluency in a language in a matter of days might sound insane to most, but for sorcerers who could augment their minds with various spells and magical techniques, it was merely a tedious chore. Magic was universal across the planet, and the Kamartaj Lost Library had been the largest collection of recorded study into the mystic arts in the world in almost every written language, alive or dead, ever made. The Ancient One still hadn't told him the story of how the Order had collapsed, but he knew her private collection of books was mostly originals from the Kamartaj or copies that she'd transcribed herself. Anyway, Izuku being an overachieving perfectionist, he strove to take every language his mentor assigned and work at it until he could think or even dream in it. He already had a solid half-dozen tongues besides his native Japanese in his repertoire. On the subject of mental magic, Izuku had been told up front by his sensei that it was one of the most risky branches of the mystic arts. The method she taught him had been tried and tested over the centuries on thousands of sorcerers to ensure they were safe, and she made it very clear that any experimenting on his part could lead to him losing his sanity or giving himself a fatal seizure or worse. So he wouldn't be saying abracadabra and making himself smarter than Nizu anytime soon, if ever. Still, he had quite the edge over non-magical or mundane people with his supernaturally boosted cognition as it was. No need to be greedy, he figured. Izuku practiced the spell work and other mystical training as his master bid until around 7:15 a.m. They went back indoors and found Inko cheerfully cooking breakfast in the kitchen. "Happy birthday, baby! I'm making your favorites this morning. We've got fresh salmon and poached eggs, avocado, toast with black garlic, and I just finished blending the smoothies." "Thanks, Mom," Izuku said brightly. "I'll make the tea. Go shower," the Ancient One instructed before joining her tenant in her kitchen. Izuku blitzed through a quick but thorough wash after roughly 2.5 hours of taxing work, both physical and psychic. His birthday fell on a Saturday this year, so he put on his school uniform for the half-day. He went to his room to pack his backpack with the relevant supplies and got to the kitchen just as his mom was setting down the prepared plates and glasses. She smooched his cheek and took her own seat next to him at the small dining table. The Ancient One set down both the prepared pot of tea and a glass bottle filled with honey. Itadikamasu. They all prayed before digging into the superb meal. Not only was Izuku's mom simply that good, but almost all the ingredients she used were grown from the Ancient One's garden or gotten from the local farmer's market. On top of that, all the tools and appliances in their kitchen were imbued with mild enchantments to maximize effectiveness or bestow extra qualities to the food. Izuku demolished his plate with the hunger of an active, growing boy refined by good manners. He sniffed deep the aroma of his second cup of tea just after adding a dollop from a jar. Green tea for a base, eucalyptus honey, notes of ginger root, lemon, and rosemary, he posed to the Ancient One. With a dash of peppermint, she chuckled. "We'll make a connoisseur of you yet, young Izuku. And can you tell me what the primary benefits of this blend would be?" "Detoxifying and immune function," Izuku said immediately. "Is this because I mentioned that summer cold is starting to go around the school yesterday?" "Better safe than sorry," the Ancient One shrugged. "I had no idea how much I didn't know about tea until I started living with a master," Inko chuckled. "I can never go back to coffee. I can make a pot of coffee as rich as Croesus when the occasion calls for it. I just have to be in a certain mood in order to make it," the Ancient One told her conversationally. Izuku savored his birthday breakfast with his mother and sort of grandmother. Checking the clock, he went to get ready to leave the apartment. Grabbing his sling ring from where he'd left it, Izuku got one last hug from his mom and a respectful bow to the Ancient One. "I'll be back to help set up the party right after, okay?" he called out even as he cast a Notice Me Not charm on himself and began to open a portal. "Okay, love you, baby." Inko grinned in his general direction, the spell already making it harder to look directly at him. Izuku took 3 steps and was suddenly out of the loft and in the nearest alley to Corisano Primary School. The Ancient One had specially warded the out-of-the-way side street to give him privacy and a convenient place to make portals to and from school. The charm was just to make extra sure no one spotted him warping from home to there and back. Most would assume it was a quirk instead of magic, and public quirk usage laws weren't to be messed with. Pocketing his sling ring, Izuku hefted his backpack and followed the familiar route out of the alley and towards the school building. "Yo, Izuku-kun," waved his best female friend Hagakure Turu from where she was waiting at the school gate. "Happy birthday." "Thanks, Turu-chan." Izuku grinned back at the invisible girl. He found her quirk fascinating, but then he found almost every quirk fascinating. Still, Hagakure's ability to refract light had so many applications besides its default of the perfect camouflage. Theoretically, she could bend the light around her to make lasers once she got the trick. But even though they both had dreams of attending UA in the hero course, she wasn't nearly as crazy about training and self-improvement as Izuku himself was. I can't wait for your party later. Your place is so cool, and your mom is so nice, and Karai-san is so mysterious, and the pets are so cute. Toru gushed, even as they both started to walk into the school. Who all is coming again? You and my old friend, Katsuki from before I moved, for sure. Izuku reviewed the potential guest list in his head. We got clear no's from most of the class, but there's still a few kids who might show up. I'll have to double-check before we leave today. I don't get why you're so unpopular. You're the most awesome boy I've ever met. Toru huffed, sounding like she was pouting. Some people don't like that I'm quirkless. Some don't like that I'm top of the class. Some don't like that I don't go out to the arcade or anything else social after school. It is what it is, Toru-chan. Izuku shrugged. I don't really care about being popular anyway. I got a couple real friends, I've got good grades, and I've got my training with Tao-sensei. I can worry about popularity once I'm a pro hero and rankings will actually matter. That's what I like about you, Izuku-kun. Your optimism. If anyone can become the first quirkless hero, it's definitely you. Toru said brightly, patting him on the shoulder. You can do it. Thanks, Toru-chan. You can even be my sidekick once we both graduate UA and get licensed. Izuku grinned back. Other way around, Izuku-kun. Or we could just be a tag team like the water hose duo. Toru bantered back. They talked a big game about their bright future as pro heroes all the way to their homeroom class. Soon as the bell rang, though, Izuku stopped talking and was officially in student mode until the end of the last class. The Ancient One still maintained the penalties if he ever started to underperform or lapse on his mundane education. Besides, Izuku just loved learning. At lunch, Izuku went around and got definite yes/no answers to the holdouts in his second grade class on who was coming to his 6th birthday party. The only other confirmed attendee was the oddly quiet Shinso Hitoshi, who had transferred in just a couple weeks ago. It was Izuku's understanding that he was an orphan in the foster system, and that was why he'd had to suddenly change schools once he was placed with his latest family. He seemed very withdrawn, worryingly so in fact, but Izuku sensed that any attempt too strong to pull him out of his shell would backfire. Still, the purple-haired boy had nodded when Izuku had asked whether he was coming. So Izuku had hopes that they might develop a better bond than just classmates eventually. Once the final bell rang, Izuku bid farewell to Toru, waved a friendly goodbye to Hitoshi, and made for the gate of the school. He was surprised to see the Ancient One waiting there. He felt his spine straighten and his extremities turn cold when he recognized the look on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately once he was in front of her. "It's unfortunate timing, but better you be aware and on guard than caught unawares," she said with a frustrated frown and just a touch of fear in her eyes. "One of my former students who lost his way is in the city. I have reason to believe he will target me, and by extension you and your mother if he becomes aware of our connection. I felt it best to escort you back home personally before going off to confront him myself." "Is this one of the ones who went dark, or one of the ones who went crazy?" "What rank are they?" Izuku asked, straight to the point. "Both, sadly, and he was one of my best masters before the fall of the Order. In other words, don't even think of trying to help me. You would prove only a dangerous distraction," the Ancient One said with a tone as hard as diamond. "You're going to stay by my side and keep your eyes open until you are safely in the sanctum of my shop. If we are ambushed, you are to run. That is an order, not a suggestion. Have I made myself clear, Novice Midoriya?" "Yes, master." Izuku bowed deeply to show obedience. He could tell in his bones that his teacher saw this matter as life or death. He respected her enough to put aside his own wishes and obey her clear commands. "Follow me," the Ancient One ordered before turning on her heel. Izuku faithfully kept step with the bald mystic. They were headed towards the alley Izuku normally portaled home from when she paused. "A trap lies before us." He never was very subtle. "Izuku, I will make a fog. Use your sling ring to return to the loft as soon as it goes up. Close it right behind you. Find a candle on my nightstand and light it with a wooden match. If I don't come back, you will always mean more to me than just my student. Tao-sensei, Izuku gasped, not liking how much that sounded like goodbye. Not one bit. But the Ancient One was already moving, faster than he'd ever seen her, crafting a dizzyingly complex mandala in only a couple seconds. "Go, Izuku!" she shouted, before activating the spell. Out of nowhere, a fog thicker than soup billowed out to cover the whole block. Izuku desperately wanted to help, but he'd sworn to obey his master no matter what. He reached into his pocket and made a portal back to the apartment. He leapt through, hating himself for doing it, and closed it as soon as he was clear. "Izuku? Baby, where's Tao?" his mom asked, looking up from her laptop. She took one look at his face, and she was charging over to him. "Izuku, what's wrong?" "Bad guy. Magic bad guy," Izuku bit out. "Tao-sensei ordered me to cut and run, and now I have to do something." He moved with speed to the Ancient One's bedroom door. He opened it, and for a moment was distracted by his first look into his teacher's private space. But he could sightsee later, for now he had a mission. He rushed to the nightstand and found a candle with numerous runes carved into it, a matchbox laid right next to it. With deliberation, he struck a match alight and then held it to the wick. The moment the flame caught, it flared higher than should be possible, turning the green of oxidized copper. Izuku literally felt a wave of magic wash over him. The sound of numerous locks clicking shut was accompanied by a sound almost like the echo of a massive bubble popping a long way away. "Boy, you better have had good reason to do that," Archimedes shouted, flying right into the room and hovering over Izuku's head. "Sensei's orders," Izuku said dully. "What just happened?" Crookshanks ran into the room, her feline face set with worry. "You activated the siege wards. Most gods would have trouble breaking into this building now that they're active. No way in, no way out until someone deactivates them or they run out of energy. What's going on? Where's my favorite human?" She said one of her ex-students who went bad is in town. She came to help me home, and she said there was a trap around the portal alley. She told me to light the candle and that she might not be coming back, Izuku forced out. Inko had followed in Izuku's wake. She frowned. Who could be a threat to Tao? She's got so much experience, and she was the sorcerer supreme. Archimedes sighed and settled on a perch set by the window. The Ancient One is one of the finest practitioners I've ever met. She's in the top 10 of all time to have walked this earth, but she's not the best. Some have more talent or innate power than her. Some are willing to go to lengths that she never will. If the man I think she's fighting this second is really here, then he's unfortunately in both categories. "Who is it?" Izuku asked. "Caecilius," Heen said, padding into the room with a frown. "I smelled him on the air and warned her myself. Seems he finally managed to track her down." "Who's Caecilius? Why does he want Tao-sensei dead?" Izuku demanded answers from the talking animals. "She wouldn't want us to tell you. You're still so young," Crookshanks frowned. "Better to ask forgiveness than permission, assuming she even comes back," Archimedes huffed. Caecilius was one of the Ancient One's finest pupils during the last days of the Order. He joined after the death of his wife and children, and the Ancient One became something like a mother to him, as she did with all her favorites. He ascended through the ranks to master, all the while quietly obsessed with death magic and trying to find a way to bring his loved ones back. Barring that, to ensure he and no one else he cared for ever had to die again. So far as he is concerned, death is the ultimate insult to all living things, a cruel trick of the gods that robs us from ever achieving our full potential, the greatest source of all our pain. Izuku could already see where this was going. So how did he react when he found out about the Dark Dimension's version of immortality? Or that Tao-sensei used it herself? Not well, Heen sighed. In his mind, the one person he thought he could trust had been hiding the answer to all his prayers, hoarding the gift of undying to herself. His mind cracked, if it was ever whole to begin with. He stole the ritual and left the Order. He formed a cult of like-minded sorcerers, and they all used the ritual to channel the Dark Dimension. Izuku felt his blood run cold. But the more energy we take from any dimension, the more attention we draw from the beings who live in it. And the dark dimension isn't exactly a friendly corner of the multiverse. Correct. Crookshanks nodded solemnly. In his blind rage and arrogance, Caecilius and his cult brought Earth to the attention of Dormammu, the cosmic conqueror, the destroyer of worlds, the sovereign of the dark dimension. Still, all Caecilius cared about was revenge against the Ancient One, and he could think of no greater pain he could cause her than to kill her after every other sorcerer in the Camartage had died first. In his madness, it would be an eye for an eye. Just as he lost his family and all he loved, so would she. Caecilius and his cult, by then a small army, attacked the Camartage. At the same time, Dormammu attempted to break through the protections the Order had been layering around the Earth for as long as they'd existed. It was a battle the likes of which are rarely seen, and even more rarely survived. Archimedes continued the tale. One of the other masters made the ultimate sacrifice. He traveled to the dark dimension and brought with him the only weapon that could defeat Dormammu: time. Knowingly condemning himself to an eternity of torment, the master trapped Dormammu in a time loop. To this day, and for all the days there will ever be, he is trapped in the dark dimension, keeping Dormammu imprisoned in the same handful of seconds over and over and over, keeping Dormammu too distracted, trying to escape to ever attempt to consume the Earth again. Inko had turned pale at the very idea. I can't even imagine. And what about the Camartage? How'd the battle end? The Ancient One saw too many of her students, her children, be butchered. She well and truly lost it. She broke every vow she ever made that was meant to limit herself and unleashed unspeakable destruction upon the invading cult. Caecilius, the rotten coward, escaped in the chaos. Of the few who survived the battle, many had lost faith in the Ancient One, seeing her as nothing but a hypocrite or a monster after everything she'd done. They all stayed long enough to bury and honor the dead. Then the Order broke apart, never to be reformed. A handful stayed sane and passed on their teachings to trusted apprentices, and so the mystic arts lived on. The rest either joined up with Caecilius or swore their own revenge against the Ancient One for their own reasons. Heen sounded so sad. Izuku clenched his fists. And now Caecilius has come for Tao Sensei again. But instead of abandoning us and saving her own skin, she's sacrificing herself and risking her life out there while the rest of us stay safe behind her best defenses. That's all I need to know about the kind of person she really is. Her other students must have been idiots to think she was a villain. Archimedes eyed him with something like pity. She's no saint, boy. You've no idea of the things she's done in her unnaturally long life, the blood on her hands, the lives she's ruined. Only the gods might be able to say whether she's atoned for her many crimes or is damned regardless. She's done bad things. I know, okay? But she's not a bad person. That's what I believe. That's what I think and feel, Izuku insisted. Now, what can we do to help her from inside the wards? Nothing. Crookshanks frowned. She's on her own out there. She might get help from a nearby pro-hero, assuming Caecilius was too arrogant to conceal the area around the battlefield. They're probably in the mirror dimension by now, though, and that's that. We have a working phone. Is there anyone we can call? Another master? One of her other mystic friends? There's got to be something we can do to help. Izuku insisted. Hein hummed. Well, can't hurt to call one of the Wongs. Wong-san, her part-time employee? Inko asked in confusion. The young one that comes to the shop is just the latest scion of a line going back centuries, all sworn to the service of the Sorcerer Supreme. Even after the Order dissolved, the Wong family stayed dedicated to the Ancient One. She doesn't train them personally anymore, but each parent has raised their children to the rank of master within their lifetime for generations. Call the one who works here, and he can send a message to all the rest of his family to go provide reinforcements, Heen elaborated. Izuku was already moving. He had a phone book in his head with his magically granted photographic memory. He was calling the number of the Wong who worked at the shop after his high school classes as fast as he could dial on the keypad. Yes, Karai-san. How may I serve you? came the reply after an eternity, for full rings to be exact. This is Midoriya Izuku. Kurai-sensei is in danger. Kaiselius is in Muzutafu. If you don't know what that means, call all your older relatives and tell them the same thing. She needs help now, Izuku said in as coherent a rush as he could manage. Understood, Midoriya-san. I'll let them all know. Where are you, though? The teenager asked, his voice suddenly serious and respectful as a soldier addressing a general. I'm safe in the shop behind the siege wards. Don't waste any more time. Izuku gave the street corner nearest where he'd left the Ancient One, and Wong hung up a heartbeat after acknowledging the information. And then he was stuck in the loft with nothing to do but wait and pray that his sensei would make it home alive. Inko half-heartedly encouraged him to do his homework or work out or help with party preparations, but didn't make too much of a fuss when Izuku refused each suggestion. He just sat by the window, eyes peeled on the street and horizon for any sign of magic, praying with all his heart and soul to his personal deity of choice. Whoever it was, as he liked to call them, had always felt benevolent yet potent whenever Izuku ran across them during his dreams and astral voyages into the multiverse. Izuku had no proof that the being would heed his desperate pleas. Still, he was willing to try anything. Bring her home. Please, bring her home, he begged the higher power. Hours passed, and then out of nowhere the wards were going down. Izuku leapt to his feet. Did they run out of power? He asked the pets in near panic. Not a chance it happened that soon, and it didn't feel like a collapse. Only one person on the planet knows how to bring them down from the outside, Archimedes said, suddenly sounding much more chipper. Izuku grasped the meaning, and then he was running down the steps to the bookshop below. He reached the base of the stairs to find a shop filled with 7 or 8 Nepalese men and women, all clearly closely related. They seemed to gravitate around a bruised, bleeding, but very much breathing body propped up in a hardwood chair. Tao-sensei, Izuku gasped, rushing up to her. He restrained himself from launching into a tackling hug, given her obvious injuries, but it was a near thing. All he'd been able to think about were her parting words and the confirmation that he wasn't the only one who felt their bond was far more than that of teacher and student. Ah, young Izuku, it would seem that I am in your debt. I would not be here intact were it not for the timely intervention of the Wong clan, and they tell me I have you to thank for alerting them. I suppose I owe you a second present, the Ancient One said with a weak grin, her usual unflappable calm and good cheer rather muted by the pain she was obviously enduring. Are you okay? How bad are you hurt? Is Kaiselius gone now? Izuku asked rapid fire. I'll live, though I won't deny it was rather touch and go until my allies here came to my aid. Kaiselius has only had time to get even more slippery and depraved, the Ancient One sighed. Young Izuku, if you'd be a dear, could you go brew me a strong pot of tea? The blend in the red mahogany box with the carving of a phoenix, please. Izuku rushed to fulfill the request, actually tapping his foot in impatience as he waited for the blend to steep. He knew better than to try and speed up the process with magic, though that would interfere with the magic of the ingredients and ruin the effects of the healing potion that the tea really was. He poured it once the requisite time had passed into his master's favorite mug and brought it to her without spilling a drop. Am I allowed to know what you had to do to get actual phoenix tears to soak the leaves in? He asked, curious despite himself. Not without difficulty, but once you know the trick and meet the right phoenix, it's not as hard as you'd think. I hope to pass down the secret to you someday, young Izuku, the Ancient One said with a grimace meant to be a smile. She took a deep gulp of the tea and sighed in a satisfaction more than just gustatory. Before Izuku's amazed eyes, her visible bruises, cuts, and other injuries started to heal as if in a time-lapse video of the ideal recovery. It took 4 cups before the Ancient One stopped asking for more. But then she stood up, for all the world looking like she'd just rolled out of bed apart from her battle-scarred robes. She insisted that all the Wongs get at least a sip from the rest of the Phoenix Tear tea for their own wounds. Once the pot ran empty, she cleared her throat. Many thanks to all of you. I'm not so proud to discount or ignore that I needed help, and each of you provided vital assistance. Izuku by spreading the word of my plight, and then each of you during the battle with Kaisalius and his cult. I am most grateful, and will gift each of you with any boon you can think of to ask if it is within my power to grant. No gifts will be necessary. Fulfilling our duty to you is its own reward, Master, stated the oldest Wong present, a wrinkled old raisin of an old woman. The fact she seemed the least injured out of all her relatives was probably a good hint that she wasn't helpless as she looked. The way all the rest bowed to her authority was another sign she'd earned her family's respect. If you insist, young mummy, but if you or your kin ever want for anything, you need only ask, the Ancient One said with fond exasperation. And you, young Izuku? I'll hold on to it for a rainy day, Izuku shrugged. The truth was he couldn't think of anything he wanted other than a promise that the Ancient One would never get in danger ever again, and he knew there was something she couldn't give. Very well, then. Now, I rather fancy a change in wardrobe, and if I'm correct, then the party guests are due to arrive within a half hour. You may all see yourselves out. Young Izuku, do get changed and pretend to be a mundane boy on his birthday. No need to alarm your little friends. All things considered, I consider today a victory, and there's no need to tarnish your special day any more than has already occurred, his teacher said in unmistakable command. The family of sorcerers all bowed before using sling rings to return to their respective homes. Izuku went up the stairs with the Ancient One close behind him. I presume that the pets informed you of Kaisalius and some small part of why he's determined to destroy me, she said as they were turning the corner for the second flight. Yes, they did, Izuku confirmed, knowing better than to lie. And what do you think of me? Now you know some of what I kept hidden from you, she pressed. I think you made a mistake when you were young, doing the ritual with the dark dimension, and you spent literal lifetimes afterwards trying to make up for it. I think Kaisalius and all the rest of your students who think you must be evil or selfish are out of their minds. I think you're a good person, Tao-sensei, and if you disagree, then that's your problem, Izuku said, turning to look her in the eye. She blinked, and he was shocked to see an actual tear fall from her suddenly wet eyes. She sniffed and wiped her sleeve across her face. Damn, near-death experiences always make me lose composure. I very much appreciate what you said, young Izuku. I only hope I can feel worthy of such esteem from you someday. You're welcome, Izuku said, a tad awkward. By the way, my name is Lianon, the Ancient One said, the most open smile he'd ever seen on her face directed at him. Izuku blinked. Nice to meet you, Lianon Obasin. He took a chance to say back. More tears, more awkward, and yet Izuku had never felt closer to his mentor. Let's stick to Tao or Karai unless it's just the two of us, she said, sniffing and trying to regain her usual placid demeanor. But thank you, my precious grandchild. I'm honored to have such a special boy consider me family. Likewise, Izuku chuckled, feeling all warm and gooey and a little like crying himself. The moment in the stairwell passed, and they entered the loft proper. Inko fussed over both of them to varying degrees. The pets were ecstatic to see their human companion alive and well, and then it was last-minute preparation for the birthday party that was still set to happen. There was a knock on the shop door downstairs, and Izuku tried to put thoughts of demented sorcerers out for his teachers, and quite possibly his own, life out of his head. For the rest of the night, he was just your average birthday boy. Itsuku-kun, my, look how you've grown. I remember when you were shorter than my knee. Mitsuki Obasin gushed when he led her, Masaru and Katsuki past the door. Mitsuki-wazan. Mom is waiting upstairs, and I think Tao-sensei is breaking out the extra kettles to make a blend for each guest. Put in your request for the spicy stuff. Izuku chuckled after a light hug with his ant-like figure. Izuku, Katsuki nodded in recognition. Katsuki, Izuku nodded back. You've been getting into trouble at Bisupian? As if, the blonde explosion user snorted. I actually got a letter of recommendation from the principal. Old hag won't shut up about it. Something about how I'm a natural leader who instills good values above and beyond what's expected in his class, and even the whole year. Right. Your mom is the one who brags about it, Izuku said with just the right amount of dubious sarcasm. Shut up, Katsuki rolled his eyes. You owe me an arm wrestling match. I still say we shouldn't have ended on tie. You're the one who insisted on a two-match lead for it to count as a win. 19-19, wasn't it before our moms finally made us stop? Izuku chuckled. Come on, we're already upstairs. Who else is coming, Izuku-kun? Masaru asked. Two kids, and probably their parents. Hagakure Turu. She's my best friend at Coruscant. She's lots of fun, but her quirk makes her invisible, so try not to stare. And Shinso Hitoshi, he's a new kid and I know how that feels, so I wanted to be friendly, Izuku answered. There was another knock at the door just as they reached the stairs. Go on up, I'll get it, Izuku told them. He went to the door and found Hitoshi waiting, looking almost scared next to a tall, broad man who was probably his foster father. Hello. Welcome to our home. Feel free to come in, Shinsu-san and guest, Izuku said. Hey there. Guessing you're the birthday boy. Hitoshi-kun wasn't sure what you'd like for a present, so we settled on straight-up cash, so you can buy your own gift with it. The man chuckled, handing over a 5,000 yen bill. Really appreciate you inviting him over. Most kids aren't comfortable around him cause of his quirk. Oh, I actually don't know what Shinsu-san's quirk is. But why would anyone be uncomfortable about it? There are no bad quirks, only bad people, and Shinsu-san doesn't strike me as a bad person. Izuku tilted his head. Hitoshi looked up in something like disbelief. You mean that? He asked in a trembling voice. Yes, why wouldn't I? Izuku said easily. Really mean it? Hitoshi pressed, getting a look of focus. Izuku blinked as he felt a presence trying to invade his mind palace. Curious, and suspecting it had something to do with Hitoshi, he allowed it past his mental defenses. Tell the truth. Do you think brainwashing is a villain's quirk? Hitoshi spoke with command. Izuku found the words coming out his mouth without his conscious control, and he connected the dots. No, it sounds like a hero's quirk to me. Imagine all the good you could do with it. You could make any villain stop what they were doing just by talking to them. You could talk suicidal people off the ledge or hostage takers into letting all the people go. Heck, you could convince allies in the field who are losing composure to keep on fighting and save the day. I mean, sure, you could do a lot of bad things with brainwashing too, but that doesn't matter so long as the person using it is a good person who uses it to do good things. That's my truth, Shinsu-san, came out in a monotone. The presence retreated and Hitoshi was left just staring at Izuku in some kind of awe. Izuku returned the look. That was so cool. Mind control is such a rare quirk attribute. You're so lucky. How is it activated? Can you just force your way into people's heads? Or is there some kind of necessary trigger? Can you brainwash yourself if you did it in the mirror? Izuku was soon lost in a mutter attack of questions and speculations about Hitoshi's quirk and how it functioned. The foster father broke out in laughter. Well, I'll be darned. You're just what the doctor ordered, kiddo. I've been telling him that since he moved in, that his quirk is a gift and doesn't make him bad, but you're the first person his age to tell him the same thing. What I tell ya, Hitoshi-kun. Hitoshi gulped. Thank you, Midoriya-san. You're very nice to say all that. No problem, just being myself. Izuku chuckled. Come on in already. You gotta try Tao-sensei's tea. Wait for us, came a feminine shout. A floating child-sized outfit of clothes followed by two adult-sized outfits made their way to the front door. Izuku-kun and Hitoshi-kun. Oh, I can call you that, right? I just figured since you're Izuku's friend now, that makes you my friend too. Turu gushed to both boys in the doorway. You, sure, Hitoshi said, actually blushing. Izuku led both families up to the loft, hoping no one detected the hints of fresh blood stains through the usual bouquet of aged paper. They reached the loft, where the pets played up their animal personas, and Izuku's mom was all a hostess considering the apartment technically belonged to the Ancient One. The party lasted a couple hours, filled with conversation, party games, Katsuki's insisted upon arm wrestling match that yet again didn't end with a decisive winner, and a home-cooked feast for dinner complete with cake. Izuku got all his answers from Hitoshi on how he understood how his own quirk worked, with Izuku apparently asking questions that the violet-haired boy had never considered himself. Tura got the nickname of Clothes from Katsuki, and they seemed to get along reasonably well. The parents all had fun chatting over tea and observing the children's hijinks. As Izuku blew out the candles on his cake, he felt a nudge against his astral body. With a spiritual twist, he detached his consciousness from its fleshy vehicle. He found the Ancient One floating there, observing him with grandmotherly affection. "What is it, Sensei?" he asked. "Today was an extraordinary day. I want to take a moment to ourselves just to let you know how proud I am of you." Young Izuku, the ghostly form of the Ancient One, said with honest warmth. "I am not exaggerating when I say you saved my life today. I was outnumbered and outmatched, and in the heat of the moment, I never would have thought to call on the cavalry as you did. So, while I still owe you a life debt to be paid at your discretion, I thought I'd give you another present besides your ascension this morning." "What?" Izuku asked, wondering what gift required them both to be mid-astral projection. "Do you remember the first day we met?" the Ancient One asked gently. "Of course," Izuku nodded. "Do you recall that I gave you my personal blessing just before we parted ways?" she gently prodded. "Yes, and I think you even used energy when you did it. I remember seeing some eldritch sparks." Izuku thought back to that moment. "At the time, I thought you'd be no more than a troubled youth that I would aid so far as my conscience bid I must. I had no idea how near and dear you would come to be in my heart. So, I'd like to give you a proper blessing, a true act of favor and protection, not a throwaway charm I would cast on any kind stranger or person in need. Will you accept it?" the Ancient One checked. "I will accept," Izuku said solemnly, sensing how serious his teacher was about this gift. The Ancient One took a deep breath, utterly gratuitous in the astral dimension, and then she began to move in the sharp yet graceful movements of her personal spellcraft. "Midoriya, Izuku," she intoned, crafting the most intricate mandala Izuku had ever seen, with symbols and shapes and details so fine they would take weeks for him to decipher. And it was only growing more complex with each step in the Ancient One's mystical dance. "May your body stay strong. May your mind stay open. May your heart stay full. May your soul stay light. So shall it be." With a final gesture, the Ancient One stepped into Izuku's personal space and laid her hand atop Izuku's crown. Izuku felt dizzy as the rush of energy, more than he had in his whole body, more than he'd ever thought possible, flooded from the top of his head down. He felt the supernatural strength of the Ancient Ones will suffuse every iota of his being. When it finally had sunk into the deepest depths of his spirit and taken root, he blinked up at the smiling form of his teacher. "Use it well," was her final words before her astral body retreated back into her physical body. Izuku took a moment in the time dilation of the astral dimension to just absorb the immensity of the Ancient One's gift. She had put her all into that blessing, using all the energy she could gather composed into the most powerful working she could describe, all to make his life better going forward from that moment. Finally, he slipped back into the real world and got back to his birthday party. After the presents were all opened and the guests had all departed, Izuku went to share a cup of tea with his mom, the Ancient One, and the pets on the outside terrace. "So, is Kaiselius gone? He can't try and hurt you again?" Izuku asked his sensei, concerned for her well-being. "I dearly wish that was the truth. But alas," she sighed, "he has sunk to depths I never thought him capable of. He already is unaging due to the dark dimension, but he's taken further steps to secure his immortality. Instead of leading a cult of zealots, he's now turned himself into a kind of hive mind. He's sheared off pieces of his soul and implanted them into whichever practitioners he can get his hands on. Like a virus infecting a new host, he's copying himself into new bodies. And what scares me is that there's no feasible end. He could overtake the world population given enough time, and the inclination. An army of Caecilius clones, each as twisted and mad and spiteful as the original. By Cami, Inko breathed in horror. So he's like a zombie now? An apt comparison, the Ancient One confirmed. Fortunately, I had a chance to examine the clones that had tracked me down and attempted to assassinate me. While the original Caecilius can coordinate and command them, they aren't telepathically or otherwise linked back to him. With luck, the original remains oblivious to our location or the fact I've taken a new apprentice. Hopefully it will be many years, if ever, before another cell or the original has a reason to visit Japan. Izuku took a fortifying sip of tea. We can't depend on staying off the radar, though. And Caecilius isn't the only threat. We need a better system. Wards around the whole city to detect when other practitioners enter the vicinity. Ways to help us alert each other and the Wongs and any other allies we have to when we're in danger. A buddy system so we're never caught alone. Maybe even start teaching more people the mystic arts and making sure they're on our side. All that's just off the top of my head. I respect you, Tao Sensei, but a passive defense like you've relied on thus far is doomed to fail. If you seek peace, prepare for war, and all. Until every threat is handled, we can't afford to stay idle. You're very mature for your age, young Izuku. But 6 is far too young to become a soldier, and I refuse to allow you to sacrifice your innocence for the sake of my life. I will take precautions and strengthen the defenses around us and our friends. No further, though, the Ancient One said in no uncertain terms. If you still feel that way once you're 18 or reach master rank, whichever comes later, then that is your prerogative. Until then, however, we follow my rules. I say we hide, so we hide. Izuku bit his tongue to stop from protesting. Yes, sensei. Ah, youth. Always in such a hurry to grow up. Until they do, and then they wish to go back to the way things were, Archimedes drawled. Let Tao worry about the villains of the magical world, baby. You just focus on your studies and being a good student, Inko all but begged. You'll be a hero someday. Just not quite yet. I hear you, Mom, Izuku sighed. He finished his cup and bid good night to the members of his found family. But a plan was forming in his mind. He got comfy in his futon in his room. Then, with deliberation, he sank into a deep state of dimensional meditation. He parsed through numbers without measure until he found the one he was looking for. He debated whether this was really the best idea. He was just a novice, but he needed to get better. Good enough to stand by his master's side instead of hiding safe at home. Good enough to survive, or better yet dominate, any fight with another sorcerer. Good enough to be the hero his family needed. So, before he could convince himself that this was too stupid, he reached out and made a bridge with the dungeon dimension.